Don't tell me my encoding is overloaded. Don't tell me that. Liar. Don't lie to me, Walt. I don't know. Source. That's the funny thing is, that's the original. I don't know what I'm saying. Yeah, Twitch VOD downloading is annoying. And I'm glad that I at least haven't got to do it. Well, not for myself at least. It's nice having gigabit. Don't have to worry about long upload and download kind of based stuff. All right, no further ado. I suppose this is about what is there additional to say. Welcome back to Draconian Discourse. So first off, we've got a just a little funny that I wanted to take a look at here. A little bit of a legal note to do a little bit of. Okay, that's distracting. Get that out of the way. Just a bit of a legal interest to take here. Do some armchair lawyering. One thing I find a little bit interesting is that the nickname or the I don't know. There's the handle and then there's the username or whatever. It's just like memes, and it's like these are not memes. These are like your own tweets. If anything, this is like reporting, and it does say 314 good news. So it's like this is a little bit strange, but anyhow. So it says Disney wants a wrongful death lawsuit from a grieving husband thrown out from a grieving husband. There's not a lot of commas in this. You have to read into it where the pauses are. Thrown out because the husband signed up for a Disney Plus free trial in 2019. So it's like, alrighty. In October 2023, Canok Porn Tong Swan, interesting name to say the least. The only reason that this is interesting is because it's like, oh, that's all right. Not to say that, like, obviously it's a name that derives from a different language, a different culture. It's just interesting that it just so happens to end in porn. So I don't know. Canuck Porn Tong Swan, her husband Jeffrey Piccolo, which Piccolo the Namek, the dark deep voice. That's not even close. I should never try to do Piccolo. We'll be focusing on the mental. I don't know. Jeffrey Piccolo. Anyway, and his mother decided to eat at a Raglan Road Irish pub in Disney Springs in Florida, since they were reassured several times by a waiter that their food will be dairy and nut-free and would not be cross-contaminated. Well, I think they decided to eat at. I actually didn't realize this when I was reading this earlier, but I'm realizing now that this is kind of poorly worded, where it's like, well. Okay, that's not what you're trying to say here. They decided to eat at this Irish pub in Disney Springs in Florida because they wanted to eat there. They expressed concerns after they had sat down that, hey, I'm lactose intolerant and I've got a nut allergy. Can we be absolutely certain that there's going to be no dairy and there's going to be no nuts? And they're going to be like, yeah. Totally dairy and nut-free and not going to be cross-contaminated. So obviously that is something that you are intended to accommodate for. And so normally I think the way that damages will work in this sort of a situation. So this is obviously a civil suit because they are. So in order to in a civil suit you must have standing. So legal standing means that you have been actively damaged by an action done by an individual or an entity, I suppose is the way to put it, because it can be a corporate entity or it can be an individual. So it means that person actually exacted damages upon you when you are looking for some sort of restitution for that, some sort of a punitive recompense for the damages that have been inflicted on you. And so if a representative of the company within the company's guidelines speaks deliberately in a way to say, we've got a a policy so that we can do this, and you know, that to ensure that you are not going to have any of that, you're not going to go into anaphylactic shock due to the food that we that we serve you, then obviously, you know, this is a that's a promise that should be kept. And if the business does not have a way to ensure that there will not be cross-contamination, they should say, actually, we cannot guarantee that there is not going to be any traces of nuts or dairy in any of this, and we would actually advise that you dine elsewhere, because we actually can't accommodate you, and we would rather you dine elsewhere than die. Because obviously that's an active liability. If they say, yeah, you know, it'll be fine, and then they don't actually engage with that promise, and they could be potentially causing somebody significant physical harm, to which they would have to answer for damages, as clearly we're about to see. So Tang Swan, an NYU doctor, collapsed several hours later and died due to anaphylaxis due to elevated levels of dairy and nut in her system, despite self-administering an EpiPen. So she knew that she was having an allergic response, and she administered the EpiPen, and obviously that administers a high dosage of epinephrine into your bloodstream, and that is intended to, you know, you're effectively stimming through anaphylactic shock, and it alleviates the shock, and your body is able to deal with the allergen properly. And allergies are really interesting because they're effectively reverse vaccines. In a sense that it's your immune system is actually targeting something on accident. It's assuming that something is a pathogen when it's actually just a completely benign particle, and so it attacks the particle, and much inflammation happens because the body is freaking out due to this, and it actually can cause you to die because it's attacking something that actually isn't worth attacking. So obviously, in this sort of amount, then you know, you can die due to anaphylaxis, and obviously this is something that we attempt to mitigate. It's interesting that the EpiPen actually wasn't able to get her help, and that I mean I would imagine because she collapsed several hours later. I don't know. This is really a really interesting situation. I wonder what happened with the autopsy to determine like why exactly did the epinephrine not that was administered not actually fix the effects that were had, and why weren't they able to, as they would immediately take her to the hospital the moment that they're like, oh no, she's, you know, we got to see if we can administer first aid immediately. You know, the paramedics would be showing up and trying to revive her, and then she would be immediately transported to a hospital. So I really do wonder what went wrong in this situation, because normally if either there's like a sort of a cross-contaminations can absolutely cause anaphylaxis to take hold, but that the EpiPen, that there were only trace amounts, as it would potentially be alleged, or that it would be plausible that there could only be trace amounts in the food itself. Obviously, it would make sense that those trace amounts are not enough to kill you, especially if you administer an EpiPen after realizing that you are actually experiencing anaphylaxis. So it's I mean, obviously extremely tragic, and I hope that this can serve as an understanding of how to prevent this in the future, and I think that this is a good suit. Obviously clear legal standing is here. Very, very clear cut case of like, hey, you told me that you would keep me safe, and you did not, and then I administered an EpiPen, and it and I ended up dying. Now there has to be enough evidence brought forth by the prosecution to prove that there was a, what do you call it, carelessness done by Disney as a corporation that led to this death happening, and I think this is a legal battle that needs to be allowed to play out. So obviously this is a troublesome situation, to say the least, when we see how Disney's lawyers have decided to file a motion of dismissal. I think obviously from the sort of corporation standpoint, it's like, well, we don't want to actually pay out people for a wrongful death suit, bad PR, and it costs us money, so we would want to file a motion of dismissal so that, first of all, it appears as though we have not had any wrongdoing, that they're actually just scammers looking for money, which is a pretty scummy tactic that corporations will use a lot of the time in their sort of PR struggles, where they will kind of try to obfuscate what happened. The classic McDonald's case, where I forget, it was McDonald's versus whatever her name was, her surname was. She had, the entire thing was like, wow, I guess you could just sue McDonald's now and just make $1 million off of that. Like, I mean, I guess, that's what people are willing to do these days. They think they're so entitled to other people's money. It's like, no, they actually were found guilty of criminal negligence, and it was given, they were given that amount of money as punitive damages, to say to the corporation, hey, if you fuck up this bad in the future once more, then we are absolutely going to hold you accountable for it. Don't ever do something like this again, unless you expect to have to give massive payouts to people. So she actually ended up getting inflicted incredibly scarring third-degree burns on her genitals and her legs, and this is like a 67-year-old woman at the time. She had to have skin grafts, and her medical bills ended up costing about $40,000, and this was in like 2005 or something like that. So account for inflation and for government subsidies, and the entire medical field becoming immensely inflated in of itself when it comes to charging with medical bills, and that is a clear indication that this was actually, because back then, you get a skin graft, it's going to be expensive, of course, because it's a very invasive procedure that has a high level of failure, especially more so back then, because the technology has improved significantly over the past about 20 years at this point. I believe it was 2004, I don't know, but clearly in that situation, that was very out of the ordinary to have somebody get charged that significant of an amount for that much, and I don't know if it's an aspect of it that she couldn't that her insurance didn't actually cover it or whatnot, but it was a very clear legal standing that she had in that situation, because they were negligent in the way that they were operating their machines, and had ignored that if you make the coffee this hot, then it spills, then you will absolutely inflict third-degree burns on people. You have to ensure that you get it a little bit lower, or that it has enough time to cool. Give it about 5 minutes or whatever. And they had not adjusted from a corporate standpoint. They had not adjusted their machine to or their guidelines to ensure that their employees, either their franchisees and the managers of each location, shift leads and etc., all of the people down the corporate hierarchy actually knew how to operate the machines as to ensure the safety of the consumer. And so that was actually a very clear-cut case in that situation. But the media sort of frenzy that they had attempted to do is like, oh yeah, it's like this one was just awarded loads of money for this thing, was like, oh yeah, she spilled her own coffee on herself, and it's like it was actually an incredibly twisted, it was a twisting of the scenario to make it appear as though it's like, no, you did this to yourself, we are not liable for that, when it's actually like, well, yeah, you are, because you actually had that too hot. And obviously it's an attempt by corporations to save face that ends up kind of blowing up in them in their faces in the end, because it's like this is a massive backfire that you were like, oh yeah, they'll just totally like trust us if we just tell everybody that this is the situation that's going on. Now obviously I'm taking this at face value, coming from this being just some random account here that's reporting about this, but So this is a very interesting way to file for dismissal. Disney argues that in the Disney Plus service agreement, the subscriber agrees to settle lawsuits against Disney through arbitration and not in court. Piccolo's attorney calls Disney's argument fatally flawed during a motion on August 2nd. Quote, the notion that terms agreed by agreed to by a consumer when creating a Disney Plus free trial account would forever bar that consumer's right to a jury trial in any disputes with any Disney affiliate or subsidiary is so outrageously unreasonable and unfair as to shock the judicial conscience, and this court should not enforce such an agreement, the lawyers wrote. And this is absolutely correct. There's absolutely no possible way that this precedent will hold. I suppose it's not a precedent that this argument will hold in court, that they are not going to actually go through with the motion for dismissal, because you clearly if the argument was that actually we have clear-cut guidelines that are extremely stringent on cross-contamination, and if you do not follow the rules for cross-contamination, people we set the rules, and we told the franchisee or we told the manager to train their employees, and those employees should have been trained to the degree that they would have actually known how to do that. And so clearly someone else down the chain here ended up screwing up here, so we are not liable. The individual person in this case is liable because they actually did not follow our rules. Though I'm not entirely certain if liability can be tossed down the chain of command in that way. That actually, if you are supposed to have rules, you are supposed to ensure that those rules are followed, and that the only way that you can actually discipline the individual who committed the grievance that ended in the cost of somebody's life, the loss of somebody's life, I should say, that actually you are still responsible for that. I don't know if there's any sort of a law or a precedent, either state or federal, in this case that that would imply that is sort of the way that they should go forward. Either way, there may be. I'm certain that their lawyers know that that's not legally tenable, or that it is legally tenable, and that's the angle they should jump for. But I still don't know how they would come to this conclusion, where it's like, well, they did sign an agreement with us in a different subsidiary of ours that says, well, you actually have waived your ability to sue us over this service. It's like, yeah, over this service. Disney Parks is a different subsidiary than Disney Plus. It's a completely different subsidiary. Just because they're under the same company banner does not mean that signing something on a site actually will prove that you have waived your rights to actually hold them liable in civil, in any sort of a civil procedure, because they did this, that they signed this agreement for a free trial account, and as it says, I think people mentioned that it's just like that one Black Mirror episode. Which one was that? I don't recall that being a legal one. Walt Disney himself would not approve. He wouldn't approve of a significant amount of things that this corporation has been doing. But yeah, they had it for less than a week 2 years ago. It's like they really had to dig for this one, and it's a clearly indicative of them grasping at straws to an immense degree that it's like, oh, all right then, I guess that's what you think. Just utter insanity, and there's no way that this is going to hold up in court. They are going to lose, and they're going to have to pay punitive damages on this. There's absolutely no way. And so some other comments of this. So basically, if you ever signed up for Disney Plus at some point, you can't blame/sue Disney for anything they do against you, even if it's not remotely related to Disney Plus. Am I getting this right? That is the way that they are trying to spin it, and I'm certain that they, for their own interests, would absolutely love that they could get away with that. The idea that they could get away with that, but yeah, it's not going to happen. There is absolutely no way in hell that this is going to stand. There's just no way. Is anyone else genuinely baffled why Disney wouldn't just pay this guy to settle? Literally no debt in Disney's wallet, and is instead going the most comic book villain-like evil route in the world has ever seen. Yeah, okay. Actually, this is what I was thinking about. This is one of my initial what's the word? My initial reaction is that I absolutely would be taking this in stride, and I will be saying, hey, hold off on this. We can settle out of court. I just have to do a a quick internal investigation to ensure that our protocols were properly followed. And obviously, that could also look like you're trying to cover up information to a certain degree, so that might not go over well. Like, obviously, you don't, like, you don't file cease and desists. Oh goodness sake! Imagine if that was their next move, is to file a cease and desist for defamation or something. Well, actually, no, that's impossible. Or sorry, that's not legal. But that would be struck down immediately, because actually, if you allege something in civil court, then both civil or criminal court, then you actually can't be sued for defamation in civil court, because it was already something that they were litigating in civil court. So you can't just create additional additional trials in order to try and clear your name on an ongoing court case. So that actually wouldn't hold either. Important stuff to remember. But I absolutely would think it's just like, hey, I'm pretty sure we messed up here. We need to do an internal investigation to ensure that we messed up, and we're going to be absolutely cooperating with the legal system. In the meantime, keep it on the table that we may be all right with settling in. We are perfectly willing to settle in or out of court. We just need to absolutely make sure that we got all of our ducks in order before we go through with this. Like that would be my entire legal strategy with this. If I were doing this, is saying we can settle out of court, and so it's going to stay out of the way of the media, and so we can kind of hush it up at the same time of actually trying to right the wrongs to a certain degree, where it's not going to damage the corporation too much, but that it is actually also, or at least it's not going to damage the brand as much, but we also are going to be paying as much as we can, as much as is reasonable. The people do not generally generally file unrightful death lawsuits, or any civil suits for that matter. I don't know, specifically with unrightful death suits, people don't generally file those as a way of just like, using their dead relative in order to get money. Like, you have to absolutely, those people would absolutely have to be like considered immensely, what's the word, low, bad faith actors. In that case, it's like, that's not going to fly either, clearly. But I don't know, there's definitely a fascinating, like, I don't think you would actually be denting the wallet here, and actually I think it would be a much better PR situation if you said, all right, we're going to make sure our ducks are in order, and we may we're going to float by your lawyers, your legal team, to say, hey, do you want to settle out of court? Just in order so that we as a corporation could save face. But we also want to do the right thing here, and not just sort of, because it's like, suing for more than $50,000 in damages under Florida's wrongful death, suing for mental pain and suffering, loss of income, and funeral expenses. So you may end up seeing it at least $250,000. I don't know if that's what they're asking for each of the grievances. I'm certain. So funeral expenses, obviously, they have legal standing for that. Mental pain and suffering, they've got legal standing for that. I'm not quite certain if mental pain and suffering, I'm not quite certain. Forgive me, I'm not entirely familiar with tort law when it comes to the nitty gritty of that as a grievance to bring within tort law. Loss of income is absolutely something that is provable. She was going to graduate from NYU as a doctor, so that is absolutely going to be something as that you can say as a loss of income, because when you have two people who are married and both of them pool their income together, that that there is immense mental pain and suffering that you have exacted on somebody by creating this wrongful death. But it is also a loss of income, because that person doesn't get to work anymore, because primarily they don't get to live anymore. So that is actually causing significant financial damages, and those should absolutely be something that they should be able to settle for without filing for motions to dismiss, because they signed a legal document or sorry, like, their legal terms and conditions for a site that they use for a single week 2 years ago that is under a completely different subsidiary and is a completely different service than the service that actually resulted in the wrongful death. That is insane. And I think everybody in their right mind is absolutely in agreement about this. And in order to save face, they're going to have to go forward with it. Like, now, like, people aren't going to forget. It's like, you filed a motion to dismiss for this. Are you just completely evil? What is wrong with you? So nobody's going to forget that, but the only way that they can possibly save face going forward is saying, all right, after that motion of dismissal doesn't go through, that because it won't. There's absolutely no way that any sane judge is just going to be like, oh yeah, checks out. I mean, they did sign that waiver. It's like, no. If you sign a waiver before getting on one of their rides at Disney parks that says, actually, if you do not follow our safety procedures, we are not liable for you falling out of the ride and dying because you didn't follow the safety procedures. So there's no wrongful death that we are liable for in that case. So signing the waiver saying that I agree to actually keep myself safe and to follow the safety procedures and precautions and whatnot, and if I don't follow them, then I waive my right, or any of my legal representation waives the right to actually bring forth charges against me in a court of law. In any sort of a wrongful death suit. I forget exactly the wording that they would have in some sort of a waiver like this, but clearly the liability here is pretty clear cut, because that would be a completely different service in comparison to a food establishment. And food establishments, the type of waivers that you can sign in those situations are, I think they tend to be incredibly limited due to the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, I believe, actually has some, both on a federal and a state level, actually, there will be laws that, define what you can and cannot do when it comes to signing a waiver for a specific company. So clearly, very clear-cut case for legal standing here. There's just no other way to cut it. And everybody is on board with this. The only way possibly to go forward with this is like, okay, that was a mistake. I don't know if I were, is Bob Iger still the CEO of Disney? I mean, if I were Bob Iger, I'd be doing everything completely differently. Like, this is incredible stuff. Like, I don't. So it says, I don't think this individual says, Akira says, I don't think anyone should move on from how evil this is. A woman is dead because of a company, and they are saying it's okay because the couple had their streaming app for 1 week 2 years ago, a free trial, and they did the waiver, like, cancel Disney Plus for your own sake. Like, yeah, this is going to be a big financial hit to Disney. I actually do kind of wonder if there's a sort of some sort of a visible hit to Disney's stocks here. Though they're up today. When did this news break? This news broke 10 hours ago. Wow. Why is this not getting reported on? Wait, this is actually, like, really interesting, because I suppose I have I have only searched the stock ticker itself. DIS is the ticker for this, but it's like, how long do I have to, okay, there's wrongful death suit, like, yeah, so there's a couple, okay, so it's shown it here, but this, okay, it's tiered, it's just separated things out. I thought Google was supposed to actually just show, like, what actually we're looking for here. But yeah, there are clearly, wow, that is actually kind of incredible. What's their market cap? Yeah, no, I ought not to get bloody distracted on this, but I don't know, this is quite interesting because I don't know, that's some strange stuff there. They're saying we're legally allowed to kill you if you use Disney Plus to save $50K. Well, I don't think that they're judging from saying, that it's a there's $50K in damages under wrongful death and also for mental pain and suffering, loss of income, and funeral expenses. I'm certainly that all of those I'm certain that, at least based off of this, I'm almost certain that they would not be asking for only 50K in this case. I would absolutely be seeking punitive damages. Like, there's no way that I wouldn't be seeking punitive damages in this case. It's just completely untenable. Completely untenable. So that's an intense one right there. So bang that one out in 30 minutes. Probably could have taken a little bit less time there. Anyway, back to the main topic of the day, which is, of course, the arguments coming from a person who thinks that conservatives are equivalent to the Mexican cartels. I was just talking about this line right here. Like, okay, I guess the Mexican cartels and conservatives are the same thing. It's like, more likely to be killed, raped, assaulted, stalked, harassed, trafficked. No, those aren't conservatives. Those are the Mexican cartels. Like, you've got those a little bit confused. It's like, no, that's actually the Demogorgon from Stranger Things. It's like, I think you've kind of forgotten who you're actually arguing at right here. But so this is the next comment in the essay here. Almost everything I've heard or read from you has been wrong. All right, that's a claim. Back it up with some evidence, and we'll see how you do. I'm definitely not getting to it all. I just want to get to the thing the things that irritated me the most. All right, shoot away. One, but the right continues to grow in strength because the principles of the left quash individualism and dissent. This is what I had said. No, the right is not growing. Okay, but alrighty then. I can certainly see why certain people would be, if you're insulated on one side or another, then it makes absolute sense that you would be seeing it from one perception versus another perception. But there's absolutely a definite growing right-wing sentiment in the Americas, or at least because people don't understand what I define as right-wing. Because it's like, no, obviously I don't think that killing, raping, assaulting, stalking, harassing, trafficking is getting is becoming more prevalent or more popular. Like, obviously I don't believe that, because that's not actually the definition I'm operating under. I've got to grab a Beppis epic. La la la. The people who believe in egalitarianism, equal rights under the law, negative rights in the sense that, I am endowed by my creator with inalienable rights, and that the government derives its power from the consent of the governed, and any government that does not have the consent of the governed, and any system that doesn't actually have that consent is tyrannical and should be either worked towards within its own system towards fixing, righting those wrongs, towards justice, I suppose, towards ensuring that system can no longer oppress people, and that it must be overthrown using individual force, in the sense that violence is just the non-aggression principle. I don't have to get into the nitty-gritty of that. There are absolutely a lot more people now who care about rights and response, or at least about rights, so that they are liberals, liberties. They care about liberties. There absolutely is a rising sentiment in people who care about liberties, and I can certainly say that there are more people now that there is a bit of a rise on people who believe in equal outcome, which is obviously on the other side. That's what I would actually define as the political left. That is also increasing to whatever degree, but that clearly there's only one of these that we should be going with, and it's not exactly that I've insulated myself against people who disagree. it's that a lot of the time when I'm looking at what people are talking about, there's a pretty, sometimes there's seemingly an overwhelming sentiment in some situations where people are talking about, equal outcome and being like, oh, this is so unjust that people don't that not everybody is the same, and that there's these cosmic injustices that we must right. And by the same token, I think there's a lot of people who I may disagree with on a lot of their risk assessment systems that also believe simultaneous, or that will believe some things that I don't believe about. I don't know, a myriad of things, but they also are saying, no, I want people to leave me the hell alone. I want my rights to actually be respected by people. I want. I think there's the pitch of rights and responsibility, acts and accountability. If you want rights, you must be responsible for them. If you don't want to be held accountable for your actions, then you don't get to act. You don't have the freedom to act anymore. You are surrendering that to whomever you are blaming. So if someone is miserable and they say it's the government's fault that I'm miserable, they need to give me more shit, then you are actually saying that the government, it's the government's job to actually act for you, so that you can be happy, and they are responsible for your happiness. This is part of the reason why the framers of the Constitution used the framework of negative rights in the sense that it's the pursuit of happiness. If someone takes away your ability to pursue happiness, then that why is the gum? My system's already gummed up. Then that is actually something that they must protect. Whereas if they said, life, liberty, and happiness, or life, liberty, and property is the reason why it's not actually in the Constitution itself, is they see property rights as if you earn something, then it is yours. Whereas we can't actually guarantee property, because that also implies that you aren't able to earn, or that you don't have to earn that property, which is not actually just that would be equal outcome. If everybody said they had a right to roof over their head, the government would actually be responsible for guaranteeing that, and that would actually directly imply redistributionism, which is a equal outcome value rather than an equal rights value. And equal outcome, equal outcome is never going to be in this universe. It just does not exist within the scientific laws. That there are always going to be people who are going to be born with inherent advantages and disadvantages in a myriad of things, and what each individual should be doing is saying, what am I best at? What can I learn? Excuse me. What can I improve on? And therefore, how can I pursue happiness with the tools that I've got, and how can I mitigate the flaws that are inherent to me so that I can I'm not hampered in my attempts to pursue happiness. Obviously, this is a fundamental principle to anybody who cares about the Constitution, and that really is what conservatism is based off of. Is American conservatism seeks to preserve the American bargain in the Constitution. So we seek to preserve the Constitution because we do believe that it is founded on correct principles. The greatest principles that have ever actually been integrated into the long arm of the law. I suppose you could say. So the amount of people who actually appreciate that is I think there was a bit of a dip there where people were like, well, actually, I really like the idea of equal outcome, and then they realize that a lot of what that means is immediate government authoritarianism, and then that turns them off immediately because it's like, I actually don't like being told what to do. I actually would love if the government could leave me alone. The only case the government should be sending in people, with guns in order to police people, then there is it's a little bit bubbly, isn't it? The only case that the government should be doing that is if somebody is actively in an attempt to use their rights to quash the rights of others, violating the non-aggression principle. So inherently, the American government is a libertarian, non-authoritarian government that respects equal rights over equal outcome, and that would be my definition of right wing. That the American system has always been inherently right wing. Now, I think there are plenty of people who can disagree with plenty of the ideas where it's like, actually, I like equal outcome a lot more because I think it's fairer, and I actually would obviously disagree with that from the very moral basis of that idea. But it's interesting that I don't know, people. I think people inherently like the idea of a meritocracy because they like the idea that they can earn things. I think what is especially alluring or tempting, I suppose, to many young Marxists is the idea that actually it's not a meritocracy. Capitalism is not a meritocracy inherently because XYZ. So it is an interesting perspective to consider, and I think we should be talking about it ad nauseum so that we can actually understand where we fall on these issues, so we know whether or not it is possible for us to actually continue to coexist in the society. And if you're unwilling to listen to somebody who disagrees on the most fundamental truths that you hold, then that is, it spells disaster eventually for a nation, because one day you are going to have to draw up borders, and you can clearly see this happening here, that there's going to have to be borders drawn up one day, and you're going to have some really unpleasant neighbors, and it's going to be very difficult for you to coexist within the same physical location, within the same hemisphere of each other. So it's going to be very difficult, and potentially may devolve into some form of a civil war if people continue to try to push this envelope that people who disagree with them should, don't actually deserve the rights to free speech, and we will quash them in ways both, legal, moral, and otherwise, like, that we believe morality to be the opposite to you, and therefore, rather than us actually reincorporating a federalist system, that we actually want to control everything. And I think I touched on this a little bit before, that generally conservatives and the right, especially the American right in particular, are willing to actually to put their money where their mouth is, put their livelihoods where their mouth is, and they will actually go out of their way to say, all right, if this place has become utter rubbish, then I'm going to move out. I'm going to move away. I'm going to find some place that actually respects my rights. And I think that's why there's so many people in the United States today, is because we've had loads of people from around the world who are like, hey, I don't actually have my rights respected, and this is the golden land of opportunity, where we can all come to in order to actually be equal under the law, even if people are going to mistreat me a little bit, and that they're going to be rude to me, then they've got their freedom of association, and I think they're using their rights wrong, but at least I am free, and at least I am free from oppression, because people who have actually been oppressed don't have any time to worry about people saying mean things to them. It's just they haven't got time for any of that, because the only thing they've got time for is living. They've got time for life and breathing, because they're not actually under the boot of an authoritarian regime. And many of these people appear to be wanting to reenact some sort of an authoritarian regime, despite the fact that they've never functioned either morally nor well. So it's really something. But no, the right is not growing, and it's absolutely not for the reason you say. It's absolutely not for the reason you say. So I'm saying the right is growing, and this is why, and they're saying, no, it's not growing, and even if it were, then that would not be the reason why. Rainey, please pardon me, 8 = D. Funny. I would assume that is Baba Uber. Oh, it works. I guess it is showing up right there. Let me see if I can hit the permit. I forget that there's always this bloody manage, stop monitoring. There we go. just once again got to keep you on a bit of a short leash here, buddy, because you can't just be hopping in the chat and making things up. All right, can we agree to do that? If you're gonna interact with me, you're not just gonna like come in and just be a little bit nasty, like just I don't know, just kind of be normal, please. You're really trying to say that the side with the infinite gender expressions in queer pride are the ones that want to quash individualism? See, this is the funny thing, is that you misidentify infinite. That's actually an interesting admission, that we've got infinite gender expressions. It's like, oh, so you admit that there's infinite now? Like, I remember in, you know, the early like culture war 2015-16, when they were just like, we don't think there's infinite genders, we just think that male and females is too much of, we don't just don't like the dichotomy, we just want to not be pegged down to these two specific things. And it's like you misidentify you know, a general cultural frustration based off of sort of an ideological divide with an attempt to quash individualism. It's like, well, yeah, so the way that you define gender is effectively just your own personality, whereas I believe that we should actually be making a total differentiation between sex and personality. I think it's actually a lot more simple for you to say, well, I was, you know, I'm born male, I'm born female, and I am a man, I am a woman, but within, because the definition of a man is in a sexually dimorphic species, such as Homo sapiens, that this species is sexually dimorphic, and that a male has XY chromosomes, and therefore that results in secondary sex characteristics, you know, by a you know, absolute vast majority. You know, the exceptions to these cases are, you know, single digit outliers that the area of gray is incredibly tiny, and those are actually genetic abnormalities that that should be dealt with on an individual basis, as to those people who may kind of be in the middle of something that maybe they've got to choose. In many cultures they're like, okay, you know, we choose and then we or we don't choose until later on, or whatever it is that they do, where it's like, okay, you know, those people should actually be told that they are unique in the sense that their circumstances are incredibly rare, and that, you know, this sort of abnormality is not something, obviously not something to be ashamed of because you didn't choose it, but that you are going to have to kind of consider it from the perspective of somebody who kind of may not fit into the general categories on an average level of sexual morphology and secondary sex characteristics than to the rest of people. So that is an outlier and shouldn't actually be used as the rule. It should actually be used as the exception. It is the exception. So when it comes to the rule is male and female sexually dimorphic species. You got XY, you got XX, and those result in secondary sex characteristics, to which there is a certain amount of variability to that. But just because there's an amount of variability to that does not mean that there are absolutely zero variabilities when it comes to certain personality traits, certain predispositions towards certain thought processes and pathologies, and also that they are physically different as well, and that actually requires that they be treated differently due to the fact that they are literally physically different. And this is something that back in the day, that scientifically, you know, I believe in the previous stream I had mentioned scientific racism, where they were trying to twist the science in a way to see, well these people are different, and we see that these cultures are more primitive, and therefore they obviously must be from a different race, and one of these races is less developed and they're closer to primates than we are, from 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 primates, and that eventually they may evolve into something later on, but as of right now they're just animals. That was the entire perspective of scientific racism, and it was an ascientific weaponization of the scientific process, and actually was not an honest way to be viewing the scientific process. And actually, when you look at the science now, that we have learned far more about just how wrong they were in that case, that people who are of different races are practically, there is actually not that much genetic diversity, or should I say biological. Am I saying a genetic diversity? I think I may be. That there's not a whole lot of genetic variation. There's morphological variation, to be sure, but when you actually sequence the genomes of Homo sapiens, that you can actually find some distant tribes of or cladistical tribes. I'm saying, like, that there's all sorts of fascinating evidences to not only suggest, but to prove that there is actually Neanderthal DNA still existent within many a population in the world, and that Homo habilis and Homo erectus and all of these things, as we've managed to sequence DNA, that all of these different species are actually sister tribes, or that they interbred with each other. They separated for a while, diverged, and then came back together, interbred, and then some of those adaptations that are found within certain particular cladistical situations, certain cladistical, I don't know, either tribes or what we used to call races, that actually we have not really proven to exist in any sort of a cladistical sense within at least a scientific stipulation, that the amount of DNA that we've got in common as a species, and like my species is actually incredibly diverse. So you got nothing on us, but still, when it comes to Homo sapiens, the DNA that they've all got in common is actually a significant portion to the degree that they must be considered the same species, due to the fact that they can actually create offspring with each other, and that offspring can create offspring, and that offspring can create offspring, which means that they've got enough genetic diversity to interbreed without actually causing significant genetic defects, but also that they're not so genetically diverse that they cannot interbreed anymore. It effectively means that every single human being that is alive on Earth today, the only difference between an uncivilized person and a civilized person is nurture, is what they have actually been taught, and so previously looking down at certain tribes as primitive was sort of the idea that they've developed certain amounts of technology and whatnot, but they're not as genetically developed as us, because they're not as technologically developed as us, and I think that that's actually obviously a massive fallacy, that people who have that technological variation and that cultural variation, and that there are moral evolutions, moral innovations, technological innovations, all genetic innovations or mutations and what have you, that all of these adaptations are actually something that everybody can collectively share within each other, because we can be one culture does this thing really well, another culture does this thing really well, they come together and they have an exchange of ideas where it's like, hey, I've got this idea and I've got this idea, they hash it out and they see if they can coexist with these ideas, and then when they find that they can, the worst parts of each culture correct themselves out, and then we're left with moral innovations and innovations only, and then we can actually tackle the next issue on the plate. I think that's sort of the most I suppose the best historical case, historical/scientific case for a sort of progressivism, is that we should be like looking for whatever the next thing is. But I don't know. I think there's a significant bias to looking towards the past and looking at the people who were quote unquote victimized or marginalized and feeling especially sorry for them, while at the same time thinking that therefore there are people who are the enemy today, and therefore we should be victimizing and holding them accountable back for the sins of their fathers is a massive leap to be certain. That actually I believe in, as would many, that we that man must be punished for their own sins, that everybody on an individual level and in an individual basis should be judged only for what they have done, and that we shouldn't be holding anybody accountable for the crimes of the father or the mother or the father's what, etc. So it's obviously an interesting debate from sort of the values that are implied here. To focus back in on this is I think people confuse individualism with confuse individual personality and their ability to have an individual personality with a genetic scientific reality that actually categorizes people into two separate groups. It's really easy to take someone genetically and say, well, based on your genetics, you have genes from this group and this group and this group, and therefore you can sort of be sorted into, well, this is your genealogy, this is where your morphology comes from, these are some of your genetic predispositions towards bad or good, and this is the way that we can do it, and that we can analyze this so that we can use this data to our advantage. I think that's obviously a very something that I don't think a lot of people disagree with, that we can actually sort of view genetics and sequence genetics and understand, well, you get some of these things from here and some of these things from here, and that genetically speaking that this can manifest itself in this way, and we can learn from all of this data, and that's fine to ask questions and explore about that data, obviously, while also agreeing that, as the data suggests especially, but also as is morally correct, that just because people are genetically different does not actually mean that those people should be treated differently due to genetic differences that don't actually call for them to be treated in a different way. So when it comes to race, there is far less of a genetic distinction when it comes to race than there is when it comes to sex, because someone who is female has two X chromosomes, someone who is male has two Y chromosomes, and actually that has far more of a bearing on the way that your brain functions, and the way that your personality and the way that your physical morphology, sexual morphology is going to fall from that, because your blueprints are completely different, and those blueprints actually have a significant amount of effects in a way that race actually has very little of an effect on. So it's quite interesting that it's like, you want me to accept the reality that due to the fact that I was born a certain way, that there are certain realities about the way that my brain functions, the way that my brain functions, but also especially that my body functions, that require certain levels of attention, that and certain problems that are unique to me due to the fact that I am genetically different, versus this situation that actually calls for different rules by the way that I live as an individual, and also by the way that we should formulate a culture. There is absolutely nothing that is learned about actual genetic sex. The only thing that has learned that you could possibly posit is that whatever was taken from the sperm that decides whether you get an X chromosome or you get a Y chromosome, and that's not necessarily just learned, that's just something that is incorporated when you were conceived. So it's a very strange thing to suggest that it's entirely just a social construct that females behave differently than males. The social science does not actually play this out. There's absolutely no evidence to suggest that the reason why why females behave differently is because those females were taught differently, and the males were taught differently, and that's why everybody behaves differently. You can understand that you are kind of pre-programmed through like, I don't know, the way that you could say it, I suppose, is that a male is given, you know, the DNA as a blueprint. You know, the genome is printed out, and then you got to follow those instructions, and it builds a body, and then that body is put together, and then there's a cognition that eventually begins to take place, and when free will kind of starts. And so there's nurture in the sense that whatever that block is originally gets slowly molded into something. But it still starts from a certain position. And so perhaps for a male, it starts as a cube, and for a female, it starts as a sphere, or something of that caliber, that you know, you can eventually attempt to mold them into something that they wouldn't naturally end up, that is far more intricate in the end, but that actually you can't really continue to carve away into it without trying to strip away all of the clay from that, and to get into sort of the wooden inside. On the inside of one is still going to be a cube, and on the inside of the other is still going to be a wooden sphere. And so, you know, you can attempt to shield it into a, you know, you can attempt to shave it away until you've carved away a cube, but there's still going to be a sphere inside, and vice versa. I suppose that's sort of the logical way that you can imagine that. I don't think that this sort of a mental thought experiment is particularly convincing to a lot of these people. What I say, and I think the best case to be made for understanding is that first of all, men and women are different, and the definition of a man and a woman is, you know, an adult human male and adult human female, respectively, and therefore that you know, an adult human male is designed differently, and an adult human female is designed differently, and that design is just the natural consequence of what began at conception, and it's in the genetic code, and eventually it grows into something that is obviously far more complex, but is clearly a result of all of that. That you can't just pretend as though or attempt to force it to develop into whatever it is, and or whatever you want it to be. The blank slate theory is sociological malpractice, that human psychology is actually derived from the genome, and that the genome has a significant effect in many ways, and the epigenetics, you know, that there's things that nature and nurture turn on or off, that you can actually influence those, and you can influence those somewhat directly, but you can't really look at the blueprints and understand the way that those epigenetic tags actually function in order to change them. You can really only do it scientifically, in the sense that, okay, let's see what happens when we do this, and this has been done. This was done, I believe, it might have been Simone de Beauvoir. Oh wait, no, it wasn't Simone de Beauvoir, but it was part of that sort of a leftist sex gender dichotomy, where they took the term gender, which was originally a grammatical term that referred to the way that you refer to certain objects with male or female modifiers. You know, it was its own separate category that actually just referred to effectively measurement words, but not in the context of an Eastern language, but in a Romance language mostly, that these you know, biblioteca versus you know, biblioteco, that it's like, you know, there's actually a proper way to refer to this, and so Italian as a Romance language has got this, Spanish as a Romance language has got this, and that as time has gone on, it's like, this is kind of a ridiculous way to refer to all of these objects, but it actually was just, you know, in some situations seen as feminine or masculine in sort of a I don't know, in an abstract sense, but that it was also sort of arbitrary. That it's, computadora. Well, it's like, why did you decide to call it a computadora instead of a computadoro? Like, why is that the way that you decided to do that? It's really just arbitrary, and it doesn't really make any sense. But it's not like, we should necessarily be like digging back and trying to artificially turn our language into some. I don't know. It's difficult to to attempt to improve a language on a sort of a governmental level. It'd be nice if we could agree to speak a language that actually makes damn sense. Because English has got a billion rules that have a billion exceptions. So consistency is not exactly the strong suit of it, and many Eastern languages, the mother language of Eastern languages, as in ancient Chinese, is immensely complicated, and every attempt to simplify it has actually increased literacy rates significantly, due to the fact that it is just objectively a more difficult, more complicated language to learn, due to the fact that it was based off of a pictographical rather than a phonetic language, and that actually creating it so that you could sound out phonetically the words that you are reading, and that you could actually intuit the meaning thereof, just by looking at the way that the sounds are ordered, and it is actually an objectively better way to communicate, and it makes it a lot easier to learn. This is something that when I had first started learning Chinese that I was confused about, because multiple of my teachers had said, after learning Chinese, coming over and learning English is a snap. It's just super easy. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, aren't all languages just kind of created equally? And then I actually understood that the function of sort of the fundamental functional basis of Chinese is significantly more complicated, in a way sort of similar to ancient Egyptian, that was also pictographical, and non-phonetic, that non-phonetic languages that cannot be written, read, sounded out, heard, are actually much more difficult to learn, because you've got to memorize all of these different characters and whatnot, and it's a lot easier to just say, well, we've got an alphabet, and we've got phonetics, and you can sound it all out, etc. Regardless, not to get off in the weeds, it's funny that we perceive a certain set of behaviors that arise, and I don't know, it's very short-sighted, where there's not a lot of looking backwards, and there's not a lot of and maybe a little bit too much looking forwards without looking backwards. I think it's perfectly fine to look forwards so long as you also look backwards at what came before, because if you don't look backwards at what came before, you're never going to be able to learn. Every single adult on the earth has I think a moral obligation to teach people who do not know as well, i.e. children, and to inculcate values and knowledge, moral innovations, technological innovations, scientific and mathematical innovations, teach as much as they possibly can, and also, have the library open to anybody so that they can continue learning and continue innovating, so that, we have actually given them, what it takes, because all of that is taught, whereas actually, human flaw is always intrinsic, and that actually if you don't do anything to try to teach them, they're not going to magically just get to your level. You actually have to assist them, especially while they are developing, so that they may actually make it to the level of understanding before perhaps it's too late for them to actually decide that perhaps I've got to do something that's a little more challenging, because the prefrontal cortex a lot of the time, or the amygdala, or both of them working together a lot of the time, they are going to actually resist help, and this has been seen in feral children all of the time. There have been sociological experiments done where it's like, well, if we just let a bunch of children get raised and we never speak to them, they're just going to start speaking, and they're going to be speaking God's language. And it's like, okay, is God's language just a form of grunts? And because that's what they're using to communicate, and it actually is a very primitive form of communication, right? It turns out that you actually have to, attempt to inculcate this, and that there is, there are many aspects of human behavior that that are genetic and many that are not, and we just need to be able to tell which is which. I think most people believe that genetics has a bearing, but you decide, and especially that nurture largely also decides what path you end up taking. But in the end, that you are who you choose to be. That free will does exist morally, or at least the illusion of free will exists, and therefore we must try, or at least we have to do what we can do to feel like we are trying within the illusion, or whatever, I suppose, because it's sort of that its own metaphysical debate. But expressing yourself in the way that you desire to express yourself, I haven't really got a problem with. Obviously, like I'm very autistic, and I prefer to express myself in a myriad of ways that some people may think are odd, but that doesn't actually decrease my ability to actually behave in the way that I deem proper. But that's also a trade-off that I have to actually accept, rights and responsibility, that it is also my responsibility if other people don't actually take kindly to that, that it's like, if I want people to accept me, then I ought to actually cater myself to something that perhaps that they will accept, and every single person does this when they're unfamiliar with how the what the sort of underlying psychological rules are, or the sociological rules are, that you kind of keep the crazy locked in until it's time, until people are comfortable enough around you that you can actually stop being yourself. Otherwise, you're going to be kind of shy, kind of quiet, because naturally there's sort of a trepidatiousness around an unfamiliar situation such as that. But also that, I don't know, focusing more on this idea, you can still be yourself and also recognize that a lot of what is you has been predefined by the instruction set that is your genetic code, and that's actually nothing to be ashamed of, because you didn't choose that, but you choose who you want to be now, and all it has to do is it needs to fit within a moral framework that doesn't cause you additional distress. So if your moral framework, that your values, you believe that it's absolutely fine for me to engage in homosexual behavior, then and that doesn't bother me, and my moral framework accounts for that and says that that's an all right thing to do, that I have the right to do it, and consent is sort of the biggest thing that matters there, and there's two consenting people, and no one's got the right to tell me that I can't do that, and if other people judge me for that, then whatever the hell, like that's their problem. Then I don't think that many conservatives would necessarily have a problem with that. I think religious people would say that obviously doesn't fit within my religious principles, and if I could convince you on those principles, then obviously that would mean that you would not continue to behaving that way, and you would behave the way that I behave, but in the sense that it doesn't actually affect me, it doesn't really bother me. And obviously, I think that's something that people with a sort of outgroup homogeneity bias ought to be able to fight. I mean, everybody's got that bias, and so everybody ought to be aware of where it kind of kicks in, where it's like, well, because I'm not gay, I don't like, or I'm unfamiliar with people who are gay, or that people who are within that outgroup, that they are far less, what is the word? Far less homogenous a population as the people within my in-group, but it that is obviously a biological trick that is kind of played on us, that we have to overcome in order to ensure that sort of a moral flaw does not control us, so that we may be acting in accordance with the proper moral framework. And I think that obviously many people don't think that that's part of their moral framework, and that's part of the reason why I'm stipulating all of this is that so that people can sort of understand the way that I view that moral framework, and that they can at least consider that point of view. To put it all in a big bow here, there's a difference between because this is the conceit that happens with this debate, that sex and gender are different. Sex is what you were born biologically as, so male or female, and gender is what you present yourself to be. And both the secondary sex characteristics and in whatever other ways that you decide to express that gender is more of a thing that you decide or not, apparently. I don't know. It depends on who you ask and on what day and in what context. And that these two things are different, and just because someone is born a certain way doesn't mean that they should act a certain way or should be expected to act a certain way. And I absolutely agree with that final sentiment there, that just because you were born a certain way doesn't mean that if you act a way that other people who were born the same way as you do means that you are no longer what you are. I would absolutely say, you can. It doesn't make you any less of a male to wear a certain arrangement of particles as clothing that are generally viewed as feminine, as something that you are not. It doesn't make you any less of a male to wear a skirt, and it doesn't make you any less of a female to wear jeans or pants or to have a job as an electrician wearing overalls, whatever. That you can be a female doing that, and you can be a male doing this, and just because we have previously associated this clothing with other people doesn't necessarily mean that it's sort of a wrong thing for people to be I don't know, judgmental of other people for doing that. But the conceit is in, sex does not equal gender, and then they say gender equals sex. It's like, you just flip this around, because you said, sex is what you're born as, gender is what you think. Sex is in your pants, and then gender is in the brain. And then they say, due to my gender, you must refer to me as what I want you to refer to me as, and you have no good right to actually demand other people to refer to you in any way whatsoever. If I went around walking around and telling people, actually, you must address me as Your Majesty, and I am the God King, and that is my name, and that is what you must call me, and you also must refer to me as Your Majesty, and you must bow to me everywhere I go, then there are going to be plenty of people who just scoff at that. It's like, alrighty, buddy. There's going to be plenty of people who play along with it just because they think it's funny. And then there are going to be probably the vast majority of people who is just like, no, you haven't actually earned that level of respect. I'm not going to just do whatever you refer to you in whatever with whatever honorifics that you demand of me, and especially due to the fact that you are demanding it of me, I'm not going to do that. And sociological science, as it's seen, it certainly plays out. There are studies that are a little bit too controversial because it doesn't support the narrative that coercion actually causes people to not want to, turns out people don't want to be told what to do. Coercion, you can't convince people via coercion. And so, there are some people who are going to be empathetic and be like, oh, so because it offends you that I don't refer to you in a way that you prefer to be referred to as, then either I am going to surrender to that demand to cater to your feelings, or that I'm going to surrender to that demand strictly for the utilitarian point that I don't want you freaking out at me. Now, I think it's sort of the second one is a moral cowardice. If you don't believe that it is true to refer to someone in a certain way, then I don't think you really ought to bow down to anybody's demands, especially when you know that those demands are immoral to make. I can refer to you as asshole if I want to. I can refer to you as a vast majority of incredibly rude things to say to somebody, and you have absolutely no right to demand that that I refer to you in one way or another. Now, if all you did was crinkle your nose up at me and be like, okay, alrighty then that, I think that would be a far more mature way of looking at that situation. All right, like if that's just the way that you want to treat me, then so be it. I guess I'll just not really stick around because clearly I know when I'm not wanted. Rather than getting up into people's faces and preaching and also attempting to pass hate speech laws so that I must be forced to refer to you by the honorifics that you prefer, rather than by the natural, both societal, biological, and visual, morphological aspects that anybody can immediately recognize within the broad sort of consensus of genetic morphology. That it's like, yeah, you can. Most of the time, you can pretty clearly tell that somebody is male or female. Sometimes people get androgynous, and that's a certain amount of secondary sex characteristics that either they intentionally change in order to try and appear androgynous, or more feminine if you're a male, or more masculine if you're a female. And then there's also this this incredibly small abnormality of intersex that is always trotted out as some sort of a club to wield against people. What about intersex people? It's like you bring out the exception and say that the way that we treat the exception should apply to the rule. That you don't fundamentally misunderstand what exceptions and rules are. So to put it in a big bow, I think people feel uncomfortable with the fact that there are things that they can't change about themselves, and rather than actually just accepting that there are some inherent what do you call it, inherent differences between people, that some people are born in certain places and some people are not, and etc., that we just don't even, I don't even want to confront that, because that is too difficult for me, because I don't want to actually be held responsible for my own happiness. I want to point at somebody else and say that, and demand that they cater to whatever I believe is going to make me happy, and force them to comply with it. So they've got to give me everything that I think that I want in order to get to obtain happiness, because happiness is a human right, or something like that. Whereas you could just understand that there are differences between all manners of people, but the biggest differences, genetically speaking, are between male and female, and therefore, due to the fact that they are designed differently, they both have different needs, and that we should attempt to cater to those needs in a way that actually fits them. So men need more discipline due to the fact that they need to be able to bridle power, because they, as a genetic rule, tend to have more physical power, physical strength than females, and it also comes along with additional aggression that tends to be the primarily determined by a larger abundance of testosterone in the body, and that actually the testosterone will still function properly in the way that it is designed to, but you have to teach them that how to actually bridle that properly, because testosterone as part of the body's signaling is this particle that the hormone that is effectively just the get up and go hormone that says, there's an idea, let's go and chase this, let's go and do this, this is what we're gonna go and do, and so there's a lot of spontaneity that comes with that, and due to the anger, if you don't actually mitigate, then the anger can oftentimes immediately lead towards the use of violence, either as an outlet or just as a natural consequence, and that can often lead to violence. If you are just violent 90% of the time, then you are not going to you are eventually going to end up violating the aggression principle, because sometimes violence isn't inherently violative of the aggression principle. Aggression is, and so if you are violent in every single situation that you're in, odds are you are going to be violating the aggression principle more often than not, because it's more of a rare case that you need that violence is justified, but it is possible that it is justified in some cases, in particular when someone else is violating the non-aggression principle against you. And so that's obviously a big part of it. Being able to recognize that for males, for example, but also that perhaps that females tend to have more emotional needs than males, or that they come at it from a certain angle, and those needs therefore need some care and attention in a way that is different. Understanding that we are different does not mean that we therefore are morally unequal. It just means that in certain situations, being great at one thing may not necessarily be statistically borne out by a demographic that genetically is predisposed to be not as good at that thing, but is far better at this other thing. There are plenty of generalizations that you can put out there that may or may not be scientifically backed, but there is a generality of differences between the sexes, and actually sociological studies inherently have been proven, where the social sciences are very far left, and they have to defeat that bias, and so they expect, their hypothesis is, we observe differences in the sexes among all of these different cultures. What we expect is that the more egalitarian the culture is, the more similar sex is, because or the more similar the sort of personalities of males and females are, because they aren't being treated and managed in a way that causes them to become so disparate. What the results showed was actually the exact opposite, that the more egalitarian the society became, the more disparate those sexual those pathologies became, and therefore those the differences between the sexes. There was a far more disparate change in personality and in thought process between someone who in any given who were grown up in a situation where it's like, you can do what you want to do, you can do what you want to do, versus just like everybody in sort of a less developed country, for example, is just like, well, we've just got to survive. It turns out when you've just got to survive, running and jumping and hunting and gathering tend to be pretty universal survival skills. Building shelters and what have you. All of those things tend to be pretty universal survival skills, and therefore the differences between the sexes are, there's not as much of a need for those to actually be focused on. But actually, when you haven't got when you've got the egalitarian situation there, they desire more difference as a natural consequence. There were other sociological studies that everybody just completely buries, that if you want to talk about the Irish potato famine, the people want to hide the fact that was a fabricated situation, and I still haven't done any research on that. So I'm just applying the same logic to this. It's just like people want to censor this fact, right? There's a selection bias against this. This study where it wasn't Simone de Beauvoir, but it was somebody else within that sort of era. It may have been the exact same pedophile who actually decided to take the term gender and apply it to secondary sex characteristics and just sort of perceptions and whatnot, and they wanted to prove that gender didn't exist, and so he decided to take these twins and he raised, I believe, one of the twins as opposite and the other twin as as a control group. No, I think maybe it was that both of the twins were raised with, without regard to sex whatsoever. And both of them ended up killing themselves before they came of age. And it's like, well, turns out maybe you might be depriving males of their purpose when you tell them to be less, when you attempt to suppress their natural nature rather than telling them to bridle it. Saying that there's a total difference between saying to males, you naturally have some of these issues, and you need to ensure that you are morally in control of these, that, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to want to be, energetic and to want to create and to destroy. You just have to ensure that you only use destructive power when it is okay to do so. You only use just sort of the entire Iron Giant morality, that those endowed with power are called to bridle it, and those called to bridle it, and so that power should only be used when somebody else is using power for evil, and so that you should only be using that power for good. Only use that power when you are protecting from somebody who is violating the non-aggression principle effectively. But when you do that and you actually just tell them your power is bad and you need to stop having it, then you are attempting to wipe clean a slate that you are attempting to treat them as a blank slate, when actually that slate was not blank in the first place. That there are some things that you actually can't erase, no matter how hard you try to engineer it and to game it out of their system. That you were actually just suppressing so many natural urges or natural inclinations and functionality that they actually will feel very much misunderstood, attacked, suppressed, and that then because you have decided that you are bad for what you are, that you actually are not called to use your aggression only for good, and therefore the creative capacity for human males goes completely by the wayside, and the only thing left is the destructive capacity, because you haven't actually taught them to act rather than being acted upon, and they're only going to be acted upon, and they lose to the natural man, as we like to say. So if you want to talk about quashing individualism, there's the only surefire way to do that is to tell people that they should be ashamed of what they were born as, and if they feel a little bit uncomfortable in their own skin, that they should try to change that, regardless of our scientific ability to actually change that, and regardless of other people's ability in society to actually accept that those changes are legitimate, which they inherently are not. So it's quite interesting. You can be yourself, but a good part of being yourself, and a good, the only way that you can actually be happy is if you have a healthy relationship with reality. And if you haven't got that healthy relationship with reality, you are going to be very, very upset, because you can't actually understand why you feel the way that you feel. You can't understand what about the way that you were designed is causing you to feel this way, and whether or not those feelings should actually be carried out into actions. And, also, analyzing the actions to ensure that those actions are morally correct, or that they bring about good consequences in a utilitarian sense for you or for other people. The entire sort of a cognitive behavioral therapy aspect of this, a lot of this fundamental moral framework is complete sacrilege to a lot of people from the sort of radical left ideology here, but this is the entire aspect of this, is that actually it's not quashing individualism to say you can be yourself and you can decide who you want to be, but you can't change what you are. You just have to make who you want to be fit within what you are within a reasonable constraint, that you shouldn't be defining yourself by what you are when what you are doesn't actually do anything. So if you want to put on skirts as a male, then that doesn't make you less of a male. You just have to understand that there are going to be people who may or may not be completely tolerant of that, and that is entirely their prerogative, and there's a mature way to deal with that, and there's an immature way to deal with that. But understand that every single action that you have is a trade-off, and every single decision that you make requires ensuring that you are making whatever you believe to be the best trade-off in that case, where it's like, well, I could wear the skirt, and maybe that might make me feel good, and it might get me attention from a certain number of my peers who find that to be something that they appreciate, whether that be sexually or whether that be culturally, or whether that be, I don't know, something that they decide that is like, hey, yeah, that's a cool passion that you've got there, that you like expressing yourself in that way. Like I think that's an entirely different thing from, like, obviously that would be the desired effect, but just because you desire that to happen doesn't automatically force it to be so. There are going to be a certain amount of people who, for whatever reasons, be those good reasons or bad reasons, be those subjective reasons or objective reasons, within whatever their framework is, that they may be uncomfortable or intolerant to that to a certain degree, and that you just have to understand that that's going to happen. Inevitably, you do not have a guarantee to feel good, to feel accepted. You want to feel accepted. That is the number one psychological human need, is acceptance, and the number one fear is rejection. But you do not have a right to be accepted, and you do not have a right to not be rejected. That anybody, for whatever reason that they deem fit, can accept you or reject you. And that there's nothing that you can actually do to force people one way or the other to accept or reject you. That you can only do things to indirectly influence that. But if you want to be yourself, and you think that means that this behavior is therefore what I must do in order to be myself, and to be emotionally secure about myself, and to be accepted, then the way that you're actually in control is knowing that there are going to be people who wouldn't make the same decisions and judge you for it, and there are going to be some people who attempt to condemn you for it, and you just have to keep on living and moving on, because because that's just life. You can't force people to like you. And the more you attempt to force people to like you, the less people are going to like you on principle. Unless they think that they are kindred spirits for whatever reason, it's just not going to actually assist you in your dealings with your fellow man. So someone's failure to understand scientific literature, or their inadequate grasp on empathy. This is the funny thing. Talk about failure to understand scientific literature. I've just spoken in some pretty great detail about a significant amount of scientific literature, and obviously this is off the top of my head, so you got to take it with a grain of salt. And if you want to look up and verify, because I haven't actually prepared anything out, then this ends up sort of being a my word against yours type of a situation, my science against yours type of a situation, but just sort of bringing it up from at least the a priori sense that, okay, let's assume that this is that this is true, therefore how should we judge with that our society should function? But it's like, who's the one who's failing to understand scientific literature? Because I'm not ignoring scientific literature. Did I actually? I think it was just a quote retweet, but there were people who were actually, twisting science and scientific. I don't know, people being pseudoscientific in order to match their empathetic agenda. Empathy is not really inherently a virtue. necessarily. Like you assume that I think that empathy does not have significant faults, if not that empathy is perhaps entirely immoral in and of itself. Like we haven't actually determined that. So if your premise number one is that empathy is a virtue, I haven't even necessarily agreed with that. Now it's interesting because empathy does not make good policy. Because I do think that empathy can absolutely be a useful tool, and that it can be a good consideration to have, where, you know, other people think differently. Maybe I should put myself in their shoes and treat them as I would like to be treated, which is just sort of inherently the golden rule, which is obviously fucking rich coming from this guy who thinks that I should die because we disagree. You know, empathy does not make good policy. If you look at it from, you know, well, I really feel for these people, and so therefore I'm going to do what I can to ensure that my policies reflect the way that these people should be feeling. It's like, no, you should be looking at it from the aspect of solutions when it comes to policy, from the frame of do people have the right to feel accepted, and the right to not feel rejected, or is that something that we cannot possibly guarantee without actually sacrificing other people's inalienable rights to free speech, you know, the rights to freedom of association and what have you, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And if the way that I'm going to pursue happiness is I'm going to be like you, Bear, you know, no offense to you, Bear, but that I'm just going to sort of find all sorts of people to just flip off constantly and see if I can annoy them into giving me some sort of a psychological capital in return that is satisfying to me, and that's the thing that I identify as happiness. And it's like, alrighty, like you're fully within your rights to do that. I don't think that is going to make you psychologically. I don't think that's going to make you satisfied or happy in the end. But to each his own, right? You know, there's a difference between feeling for someone and feeling for someone so hard that you start to only care about one person in that situation. And I think that there's some incredible short-sightedness in that, you know, if you care too much about one person in the situation, if you are so in the shoes of one person in a situation, then you end up creating a policy that is actually too broadly considering from only one perspective. And again, it's rich coming from this individual that they would also argue that it's just like, well, it's not my fault that some people decide not to take it from every single angle that they possibly can. It's just like, who's doing that? Because you refuse to see it from my angle, right? It's like, you know, inadequate grasps on empathy. It's like I really don't think that that's necessarily a massive issue. I've got plenty of empathy / sympathy for a multitude of people, but when we are actually talking about rights and responsibility, then that's a completely different conversation, because nobody has a right to be empathized with, and also this is not a standard that they actually apply evenly. You don't care about empathy. You only care about empathy when it actually is advantageous to you, because you and this is something that I said yesterday, that empathy only matters when it applies to people who you dislike. If you can stop for a second and think, okay, how should I treat this individual? Because I need to look at it from their perspective. Why do they think the way that they think, and how should I treat them in a way that actually is going to be virtuous, in a way that I can't expect them to treat me any different if I treat them poorly. You know, this is a moral standard that, you know, it's prescribed in the Judeo-Christian perspective. You can get it from wherever else, but I think it's a standard that is only used as a club with which to beat people into submission. It's you don't actually want empathy. You only want empathy for people who you feel bad for. You only want empathy for yourself. One rule for thee and another for me. And that's just inherently, I'm not going to go along with the assertion that I need to feel bad for the people that you want me to feel bad for, when you aren't willing to feel bad for the people that I want you to feel bad for, namely me. I would rather you respect my rights and not want to kill me because I disagree with you on plenty of moral issues. You know, then maybe I would be willing to have a good faith conversation on whether or not I feel sorry for certain people, which I absolutely do, who are struggling with all sorts of queer struggles, whatever you may want to call it. This is coming from a bisexual male. This is coming from somebody who actually understands a significant portion of what it feels like to kind of wish that you weren't male in plenty of ways, in terms of morphology, in terms of being frustrated with my sort of psychological genetic predispositions, with perhaps the way that other people accept me, and all sorts of things. That this is something that I've been through, but I really have gotten to the point that I actually don't mind it so much anymore, that I'm actually secure in my personal identity, and so that actually doesn't bother me that other people may judge me for it. That actually the only thing that bothers me about it is that those people are going to continue to think that way, and they're going to those voices are only going to get louder the more you attempt to silence them. And that actually, if we let the floodgates free, then there would be sort of a spike in people who don't want to understand each other for a certain amount of time, and there'd be a spike of nastiness. But in the end, it pays off, because you risking something that inherently, when it comes to rights, doesn't really matter that much. Your feelings, inherently, it pays off in the sense that you are actually having conversations with each other, which means that open market of debate is allowed to roam free, and eventually people will come around to having thick skins, and being able to live in the world without feeling insecure. Every single meritocratic system, either be that sports or be that sort of the psychological meritocratic system of something as granular as a black ops, classic sort of black ops lobby, where everybody's just sort of yelling racial slurs, and everybody's if I hear a woman, then it's get back in the kitchen. If I hear a fire alarm go off, then I'm going to assume that you're black, and then I'm going to call you the N-word for it, or that I'm going to say some sort of stereotypical racist thing, or that if you appear to have some sort of a Hispanic accent, then I'm going to assume you're Mexican, and that I'm going to sort of freak out about that I'm going to kind of target that, and that actually that makes everybody's skin thicker, and that now we're inculcated, rather than being insulated, we are sort of mental, what do you call it? Our mental capacities. And this is something you see in New York Irish culture, especially, where everybody's just busting each other's balls constantly. And so they end up being very non-sensitive when it comes to, I'm not going to get offended that other people think differently of me. Differently of me. I'm actually very secure. And so you sort of have a psychological, what do you call it? Immune system, and I think there are some people who, due to their psychology and the genetics behind it, are less biologically inclined to actually have a stronger sort of psychological immune system, as you will. I personally, I'm autistic, and that causes my psychological immune system to be a lot more sensitive to outside prods and prickings, but actually that me being fully aware of that, me being fully cognizant to that, has actually made me stronger, has actually helped me appreciate my the fact that I can control those emotions, and I can ensure that even though that sometimes it hurts, that I am actually in control of how I decide to respond to situations, that I can act rather than be acted upon. Hello, who shook the jar? Yeah, yes indeed. Yeah, who did shake the jar? I don't know if I showed you this meme earlier. Notorious Rooster. Have you been streaming for almost 2 hours now? Yes, correct. It's been about an hour 50. So anyway, next little bit here. Someone's failure to understand scientific literature or their inadequate grasp on empathy does not make someone more or less unique. This is... Okay, what exactly is this saying? If you fail to do both of these things, which I see to be a virtue, that does not make you unique. I guess I would tend to agree that if you are unaware of certain scientific studies or writings or judgments that other people have made on scientific findings, or that you are less inclined to listen to people who, or I don't know, are less inclined to cater to other people's sort of emotional needs, does not make you unique. It's like, well, yeah, like there are plenty of people who are unaware of science, and that also, I mean, you can, and they have written, books aplenty about scientific things that the vast majority of humanity doesn't actually know about. It's like that, there are books on books that I haven't read about plenty of immensely granular, studies when it comes to science that, I'm not aware of. Like, I'm definitely not arguing that isn't the case. I don't know. I feel like people, this grasp on empathy, it's like, if you do not have the biases that I have that cause me to feel bad for the people that I tend to feel bad for, then you don't have a grasp on empathy. No, I don't have your grasp on empathy. Like, your definition of empathy is if you feel bad for people who I feel bad for. My definition of empathy is to want to understand, put yourself in someone else's shoe, put the shoe on the other foot, and sort of act by the golden rule. Treat others as you would prefer to be treated. Obviously nobody is unique in that respect. Everybody has a certain shortcoming in that regard. I don't know what exactly the point is going in this direction, but this is honestly what it comes down to. These people have something deep within them that not even they understand. I think that could be said of literally every single intelligent being that has ever existed, whether we know about them or not. That there's something deep within them that not even they understand, and you're shouldering everyone around them with the impossible task of understanding them better than they understand themselves. Pop meat kettle, buddy. Once more, the projection is very very clear here. You're shouldering everyone around them with the impossible task of understanding them better than they understand themselves. This is what you are saying to people who think that you really ought not to attempt to change your biological sex through sociological or through the physiological genetic tampering, or through whatever. Not in the sense that it's necessarily immoral, though there are plenty of people who believe that to be the case, but that it is not utilitarian and that it does not make you happy. And there's plenty of empirical evidence that you can use to back that up. It's like, you are saying that conservatives inherently don't understand themselves because there's like biases that exist within them, and this is unique of conservatives for some damn reason. Like I don't know where this comes from. It's like, no, everybody has things that they don't understand about themselves. That's the importance of speaking with each other. That's the importance of actually talking to each other when we disagree about things, is so that we can exchange our perspectives and we can intuit who is right about this thing and who is wrong about this thing, and therefore that I can drop the wrong parts about what's wrong with me, and you can drop the wrong parts about what's wrong with you, and I can adopt the good parts about what's good with you, and you can adopt the good parts about what's good with me, and then through that, the exchange of information has made us both benefit from actually speaking with each other. You don't want that to happen because you don't think that there is any single good thing that my differing perspective can ever offer you. And I think it's incredibly rich to say that that empathy is something that I lack, when that is your perspective. Who's not empathetic in this situation? I'm quite empathetic. I'd say I'm sympathetic to trans people, queer people, etc. I'm tangential to them in many ways. I'm not a collectivist, so I don't support any sort of a collectivist movement that stipulates that you are part of this group, and therefore that defines every single thing about your life. I don't really think that that's the case. I think there are certain things that are defined by you being in a certain group, but that is neither good nor bad. It just is, and that we should just deal with it in whatever way that makes us happier. So long as that is not actually violative of other people's rights, which inherently I don't think will make us happy in the long run. Who's shouldering everyone around them with the impossible task of understanding them better than they understand themselves. I think there are the vast majority of people who want to express themselves with quote unquote infinite gender expressions don't understand themselves very well at all, and that you want people who that you perceive to not understand them very well to be able to you want to shoulder that responsibility, or the impossible task, as you call it, to try to understand where they come from, but you don't actually want that to happen in the opposite direction. I think everybody should be attempting. It's not an impossible task. This is why I'm an optimist and you're a pessimist, is because I don't think it's an impossible task to try to be empathetic towards others. I don't think it's an impossible task to try to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and think, if I want to be treated the way that I want to be treated, then I ought to treat other people the way that I want to be treated. You know, the golden rule. And that, you know, if I want to convince this person, I should try to see it from their perspective so I can actually convince them in an effective way by, you know, finding the common ground between the two of us and saying, okay, where do we actually disagree about this and why? What is the fundamental dispute that is going on here? And my ideas, if I can educate them with their ideas, and their ideas, if they can educate them with mine, even if we go away still not agreeing about the fundamental concepts that and fundamental values, that at least there were some things that we could agree on to the degree that we can actually coexist in a civil society together. I don't think you want a civil society because you think that everybody who disagrees with you is evil and must be quashed by either collective action or government oppression, which inevitably is going to end in blood one way or another. Oh yeah. Sometimes conversations are fruitful. I would agree. Sometimes they're laced with poison and evil prevails. Who's the one who's poisoning the debate here? Who's poisoning the conversation? I'm curious. Who's poisoning the conversation? The person who says everybody should have the right to be speaking with each other, regardless of how sort of toxic or pervasive their ideals are, that we should be able to speak about this, and may the best idea win, and may everybody come to their own conclusion on who they believe to be correct in this situation, you know, so that we can actually understand each other. Is that poisonous? Is that idea poisonous? Or is the idea that everybody who you disagree with should die, is that a little bit more poisonous to the debate? Because this is something that you pretty clearly stipulated, where I mean, it was like you don't only think that these people who are undesirable should have the right to exist, but you also think they should have the right to spread their unacceptable opinions. It's like this is literally fascism, buddy. Like, you didn't clearly say that you wanted everybody to die, but that is the natural consequence, and that is the implication when you say you think that people who I disagree with should have the right to exist. It's like, yeah, because I don't think that I have the ability to just deprive people of that right. Like, who is the one poisoning this conversation here? Like, you know, the way that I would amend this statement is sometimes conversations are fruitful, and sometimes conversations breed contempt, and that contempt limits the ability for people to actually understand each other anymore, and that we should actually try to weed out contempt and biases from conversations so that we can actually learn from each other. I don't think you want to learn from people. Like, I believe your ideas to be morally repugnant in many ways, particularly the idea that free speech must be quenched because people who disagree with me are inherently wrong and evil, and unacceptable, and therefore we should force them out of our institutions and potentially not allow them to exist, that they should just die. Like, bro, what is the limiting principle of that? I don't think you'd like that if I did it. Not that I have to keep on that situation. I think your definition of evil is fundamentally different than mine, which is why we should actually be speaking about fundamental rights and fundamental values and beliefs, because then maybe you can learn something from me and I can learn something from you. If you convince me and you turn out to be right, then I haven't lost anything of value. If you convince me and I turn out to be right, then you haven't lost anything of value. We've actually mutually benefited from this exchange of information, because now somebody is actually doing something that is correct, or at least that one or the other has actually been able to improve their argumentation skills through the exchange of information, in the very least, or in the very least has been able to say, all right, maybe it was bad that I said that people who disagree with me should die. I just don't really like rubbing shoulders with them because they make me uncomfortable. Like I feel like that actually would mean a lot to hear from people within this sort of persuasion. Like that would be a great admission to hear, where it's just like I just don't feel comfortable around these people. So I do believe that they have rights. I just wish I didn't really have to put up with them, because I think that admitting that is the first step towards actually being able to, in a mature way, disagree civilly, rather than, because, you're really bordering on the incredibly uncivil when you say that I should. Is that even bordering at that point? Like that's not bordering. Like that is immensely uncivil to say to somebody that you should die because of what you believe. Like. Oy. Sometimes people are lucky and you can get through to them, but not everyone is a healer, and fewer are born one. So this is just weird. Are people primarily determined by their location, the place they're born in, what genetics they've got, nature, nurture, are people predestined, or can people actually decide to be what they want, what they desire to be? Are you in control of your own destiny, or are you not? Because if you're not in control of your own destiny, then, there's a lot of things that I don't think you can necessarily stipulate. Like if we're just sort of like electronic signals floating around in space, then I don't know if you can necessarily argue for any necessary moral arguments. I suppose you're just saying that all of this is subjective, but we can all agree to some things, and so therefore we should, like, I don't know. It's like not everyone is a healer. It's like, what does that mean? That we shouldn't try to actually appeal to people's human nature. We shouldn't try to actually understand other people, or that we should never try to care for people, or to I don't know, try to convince them to act better in whatever way that we believe is the best way to act better. Like, again, this is just massive pessimism, where it's just like, not everyone's born a healer, so I don't have any responsibility to try and make anybody else be a better person. I don't have any responsibility to actually attempt to inculcate my values in people through any other means but the sword. Like, this sort of laziness just both enables and encourages just radicalism. It's like we should actually be listening to people and having these open debates and discussions. That say till I'm blue in the face. I don't know how to actually. I don't know. Maybe there's someone I need to have this conversation with back and forth. Geologists dissent all the time, even though they all agree that the Earth is round. Yeah, that's certainly true. They all agree because of the preponderance of evidence to suggest that the Earth is round. With all of the objective measures that we've got, we've been able to agree, within this framework that, well, clearly the Earth is round. And also, you can actually see empirical evidence for yourself that anytime you hop into a plane and it goes, up to a certain height, you can literally see the curvature of the Earth, and it's not just some sort of a optical illusion. There's plenty and plenty of proof. There's boundless proof that the Earth is round. And they still shun the fascists who try to use their degree to lend credence to the contrary. What? Who the hell are the fascists here? What is this bizarre conclusion that you think everything can be objectively known, and because there's evidence to suggest it, that there can never be any sort of scrutiny or doubt, that can't even be entertained? because I think we should be able to entertain all of the information possible, all of the voices possible, and we can entertain that information. But if we actually look at all of the information in its preponderance, then we'll be able to come to a rational conclusion. But it's not nobody's choice whether or not we want to silence some things that we personally came to the conclusion that those things are implausible, and to uplift things that we came to the conclusion that they are plausible. This is just inherently an anti-intellectual movement, and this is actually what the fascism is. Fascists don't actually go out and say, maybe you should consider my point of view. They don't say that. They say you don't get the choice to consider any other point of view but mine, because I'm going to shoot you if you don't. That is what fascism is, and that is exactly what you are advocating for in this situation. It's bizarre that people don't understand. Like, people just think that fascist equals everything that I think is bad, and so they're going to lump in conservatives with that as well, when actually fascism is the same side of the coin that they are on. It's just utterly bizarre and inept. And like, you can lend credence, like this is the point of a devil's advocate, is that, okay, let's just try to take it from that position and see what the best case that can possibly be made for it can be. Like, have you taken a single damn philosophy class? Like, please. You can believe that the earth is round, or you can be wrong. I mean, yeah. I would agree with that, because I don't believe that you can. I believe that premise 1 is that the earth is round, and that premise 2 is that if you believe opposite to that, you are wrong, effectively. I would agree with you on that specific scientific fact. Or you can just believe, just as you can believe that there are infinite gender identities, or you can be wrong. This is the wildest fucking anti-scientific, frankly, ideologically fascist behavior, logical train imaginable. That it's like, you can believe the earth is round, or you can be wrong. And you can also believe that there are infinite gender identities, or you can be wrong. I think your definition of gender identity is just the way that people have the way that it's like, why do you think that your need to be accepted by other people requires that everybody else respect a magical, it's like, we have names for a fucking reason. Like, names, that actually is intended to identify, oh, this is your first name and your last name, and that refers to you as an individualism. There you go. Individualism. It's right there. It's like, no, I want to tear down everything that there is about other perceptions, and I want to actually own every single thing about it. So, okay, so you can change your name. It's like, no, I want you to actually believe that I am something that I am not. No, I'm not willing to lend any credence to the ideological fascism in that case. I'm not going to agree with it. I'm going to disagree with it, and I'm going to present evidence to the contrary, and I'm going to present my point of view on why that is not a morally correct, or at least a utilitarian way to live. But this is the once more, this is the exact dogmatic thinking that I was criticizing with this other creature, that it's just like, you can think the way that I believe, or you can just be wrong. It's like, yeah, obviously I believe that people who don't agree with me are wrong, otherwise I would agree with them. Like, this is inherently what philosophy is. This is what these arguments are. Like, it's so tiring and childish. Like, yes, I believe what I believe is true. Like, yeah, I believe what I believe. Yes, I agree with me. Obviously. If I didn't believe what I believed, I would believe something else. Like, what you are saying is that I believe that the people who disagree with me are wrong. It's like, okay, have you proven that? Have you actually made any arguments for that case? The only argument that you have said is that everybody else agrees that this is the case, which even that is not even true. That there are plenty of people who disagree, and not every single person who disagrees has absolutely no credentials whom you can trust to be a part of your dictatorship of the wise, as you seem to want to advocate for. There are people who are just as intelligent and just as well versed in scientific knowledge, scientific literature, who disagree with this idea that there are infinite gender identities. Like it would be far more plausible if people would say, well, yeah, so there's genes, and then there is the way that you present yourself, and this is my attempt to preserve individualism, and I think, you know, people can just behave whatever way that they want to behave. It's like, well, yeah, we agree on all of this. So what is the point? It's like, well, that also that just means that you should actually respect my butchering of the English language and my attempt to force you into also using the language in the way that it is literally not intended to be used. That you know, especially in a way that actually causes abject harm. If we want to talk about like, oh, your ideas cause harm, it's like, no, there are trans people who have died because they decided, it's like, oh, well, you know, sex is one thing, but gender is another. And then they go in and they say, what's your sex? And then they refer to their gender within their own ideology. That's like, oh yeah, no, I'm biologically male, but I feel like a female, so I'd rather you refer to me as a female. And it's just like, no, okay, you told me you had abdominal pain, and so you came to the ER, and rather than actually looking for a baby because you're a pregnant female, we went about it in completely different, with a completely different risk analysis, and the baby ended up dying because you were actually about to have a miscarriage if we didn't operate on you and perform an emergency C-section. Like this is something where, you know, the baby can die, or the trans individual can die, where it's like, maybe we should actually, if you want this to be the case where it's just like, well, you can just sort of treat me, you know, use female pronouns on me, and I don't know, like I personally don't mind people using female pronouns on me, or, you know, just because I find it kind of funny. I don't know, maybe you could call that autogynephilia. I don't really care. You know, if people want to call me names, they can call me names. So it turns out I'm not actually emotionally weak, and I can take people calling me names. I'm going to be a little bit more frustrated when people actually malign me and put words in my mouth and assume me to be something that I'm not. It's like massive straw men all over the place here. And also inability to understand that you're actually the fascist in this situation. It's just so tiring. Do I gatekeep someone if they believe only 1,000 gendered identities exist, or 100 or 3? No. So you what? So you think that the correct the correct definition is or the correct idea is that there are infinite gender identities, which it literally, you could just say that every single person is a unique individual, and I would be right alongside you, and I'd be agreeing with you, and that each individual has actually the right to tell everybody within their social circle that, hey, if you actually would refer to me by the opposite pronoun, then that would be much appreciated, because I want you to appreciate sort of the way that my mind you know, deals with these issues that and whatnot. And then if other people are like, actually that's a religious principle that only focuses on your subjective feelings, and I'm not going to actually put your feelings over the truth, then they can be like, all right, like if that's the sort of the situation that you're arguing for, then I'm right there along with you. The issue is when it ends up being this literally, definitionally, ideologically fascist idea that we should force people who don't say the things that we wish them to say, who don't bow down and kneel down and pledge allegiance to the regime that says that you have to respect other people's feelings, so long as the regime tells you to do so, instructs you to do so, commands you to do so, that is actually something that should be done. It's like, no, I can't agree with that. Like, I can absolutely respect that people are within their rights to do that, but they also have to respect that I am within my rights to not call them as they demand me to call them for whatever reason that as I see fit, and that you also have the right to not associate with me if you prefer not to. But if you want me to respect you, then you should actually make attempts to gain my respect. And if you want to gain my respect, you should actually treat me as you would prefer to be treated. You should treat me in a way that is kind, that is actually empathetic, as you say, and that actually will prosper you more in the long run, and you will be happier and I will be happier for it, regardless of how much we disagree about these things. so it's just, I don't know, it's strange. It's like there are infinite gender identities, and that is the correct opinion. But I'm not going to discriminate with people if they delineate on that issue a little bit, where they say, well, maybe there's only 1,000, maybe there's only 100, maybe there's only 3, and it's like, no, I'm not going to gatekeep those people. Do I gatekeep them if they say 2? It's like, okay, this is going to be interesting. If they believe so after talking to them, absolutely, without question. It's like, okay, so you're a fascist. Straight up, you're a fascist. You don't actually want... Because gatekeeping is different than freedom of association. Saying, I don't really want to be around you because I think you're a bigot. That is within your right. Saying, I am going to... tell everybody and enforce this in a mechanism of collective action against you because I want to convince them that you're a bigot, and I'm going to take you out of context to make it seem that you're a bigot, and I'm going to lie about you, bear false witness, and malign you, and tell everybody this person's a bigot. They said bigoted things against me. Kill them, or in the very least gatekeep against them. And once again, there's no limiting principle to this. It's like, if I can't convince them that I am correct, I don't want them in any of my communities whatsoever, because I think that if they believe differently to me, that they are dangerous. It's like, I think the only thing that you can disagree with me on, and for me to consider you dangerous to the point that I don't think that we can actually coexist, is if you think that I should die and that you actually prove that you are a legitimate threat against me and other people because you believe that people like me deserve to die. That is the only case where I think that it is acceptable to say, no, we're not going to tolerate that, because that's actually putting people in danger. But you think that me disagreeing with you, like, you really don't think that reasonable minds can disagree on this question? Or that they can disagree on this question up until the point that they actually side with genetic reality, with the scientific reality that human beings are a sexually dimorphic species? What the hell is wrong with you? Like, this is such mental gymnastics. Does that mean that a person can no longer learn that there are infinite gender identities? No. But it does mean that you haven't actually attempted to teach them that. It does mean that you haven't attempted to convince them that. And it doesn't mean that the burden of proof is not still on you to actually make a good case for that being the case. And you haven't even made a case for that. This example in particular, you actually haven't even made a sound and or valid argument about this. There has been no argument presented. The argument presented is that it is true. Which I guess this logical situation is premise number 1 being there are infinite gender identities, and this is the gospel truth, which obviously I am not going to agree with any of it because I can't agree with that principle inherently. And then I don't think this is sound, nor is it valid, because I think it's actually contradicting itself in the sense that you think that it is correct to that every single that there are infinite gender identities, and that it's okay to gatekeep people who think otherwise, but only in the case of people who think that it is down to 2. But reasonable minds can disagree and vary on whether it is more than 2. Anywhere from 3 to infinity. Like, this is just completely bereft logic. Does it mean that person can no longer reach out to me or the people they might be willing to talk to and to engage in debate will come to the understanding that there are infinite gender identities? No. Yes, it absolutely fucking does. Because, literally, if I reach out to you and say, hi, I was just wondering if you wanted to talk about, to have sort of a intellectual discussion, an exchange of information with what you think the moral case, what you think the ontological, the utilitarian, whatever, the philosophical case. Where do you come down on this philosophical question? Because I believe we disagree on this, and I want to understand your perspective. Because I've literally gotten fucking blocked for that. Like, this was a long time ago. I believe I was only like 17 or so. There was somebody that I had known, and I was just like, basically asking the true scum question, where I'm like, do you think that that there's a legitimacy to the moral idea of sort of the true scum thing. I think it was interpreted poorly, but I think it's like the entire reason that you are that you are rejecting people who disagree with you, and that you emotionally respond to people who disagree with you is because of this inherently subjective this very subjective standard that you've got, that you don't actually like the fact that other people disagree with you, and you're uncomfortable with it, and therefore you don't want to engage with people who disagree with you, and you'd rather them just cease to exist. And perhaps if you had the Infinity Gauntlet, you'd snap it and you'd kill all of the people who disagree with you, just so you don't have to deal with that uncomfortability anymore. Turns out that would be violative of every single person's rights who you've just snapped out of existence. But it's like, I'm going to gatekeep you. Does that prevent you from talking to me? It's like, yeah, bloody does, because you are actually actively taking me from the situations where we could actually have these debates, and you are quashing that debate from ever happening in the first place. Now, I think there's absolutely a valid there's validity to the idea that there is a time and a place to have these sorts of conversations, but I think that if we actually want to improve our interactions with our fellow man, that we should actually try to curb the emotional reaction, the subjective reaction to every single thing that surrounds us, and that we should probably not jump to the knee-jerk reaction in every single case when someone says something that we disagree with. That's actually the only way that we can it was Ralph Waldo Emerson. I just didn't pull this up, but let me never fall into the vulgar mistake of dreaming that I am persecuted whenever I am contradicted. It's like, yeah, let's actually go into the intellectual discussion here, but you are just keeping people out of the situation because you already have decided in your mind that you are going to define them as a bad person, and that those bad people are undesirables, unacceptable people, and they need to be castigated outside of your society. And because, again, there's no limiting principle. If you are willing to limit it with a micro culture that you don't actually control, that you are not like in leadership of in a actual moral sense, I think the only control that you can actually have is first of all in sort of a consent of the governed, where it's like, well, I own this corporation, and I'm going to decide that this corporation is going to associate with only these kinds of people, and all of the people who pay my corporation, associate with my corporation, are going to agree with that, because we sort of have a common set of values that we agree on. And the people who don't like that can go elsewhere. I think there's a difference between that and sort of taking the entire damn community and doing it with it, where they're just like, you can call it like anthropomorphic, but you can't call it furry. You have to call it like alt furry. You have to call it like right wing furry. You have to call it like something else. You have to create a different brand of it, because this brand of it, which inherently is not owned by anybody, this culture is not owned by anybody. You can't own culture. That this demographic, we can define certain people outside of the demographic, rather than understand that, well, if the definition of furry is all of these different people who identify with these anthropomorphic creativity and self-expression, that there are some people within that group that it's a very heterogeneous group, and that you can't sort of define other people outside of it, where it's like, well, there's sort of a broad consensus among this culture that they believe all of these things, and there's sort of more of a minority of this culture that they believe sort of these things. But I truly think that this microculture is a microcosm of American culture, and that most Americans want to be left the hell alone, and this cultural authoritarianism does not. The only people who go along with it are either on the left and buy into it, or want to be left alone by the left, and therefore think that if they actually surrender to them and bend the knee, that they'll leave them alone. And it turns out when you feed the crocodiles, eventually you'll run out of meat, and then they'll eat you. So no. Don't submit to the mob, because then you are at the mercy of them. Does being gatekept from a community prevent you from introspection, growth, accountability, responsibility? Absolutely not. Yeah, of course. It depends on so obviously I am making a decision. I am making a trade-off by expressing conservative beliefs and saying that I think it's a little bit nasty to discriminate people based off of your perception of beliefs that you don't even know how to define and you don't even know how to understand. It's just a general aesthetic that you don't tend to like these people. That's actually bigoted behavior, and that's what I'm calling out in this case. That there's a difference between saying, hey, I think you've actually got some holes in your reasoning, and you should probably change your reasoning and probably change your actions because they're not morally correct. There's a difference between saying that and saying that I'm not also responsible for understanding that there are still going to be people who disagree with me when I express my opinion. Every single time I speak, I know that there's the right to freedom of speech, and then there is the responsibility with freedom of speech. And then, therefore, considering there is a responsibility, given that there is a utilitarian perspective to take into account, that I am responsible for the consequences, therefore that I should consider what the consequences may be. And so, obviously, I'm making this trade-off. I'm making this as an attempt to in a good faith attempt to actually present my position. And the trade-off that I'm making is I don't think I'm necessarily going to convince leftists, because I don't think leftists are. It's possible to convince leftists because the disintegrationist left necessarily. I think it's who I am convincing are liberals, be those right-wing liberals or more centrist liberals. People who believe in rights, people who believe in equal rights rather than equal outcome, who actually would agree that, hey, yeah, I am kind of sick and tired of this culture of censorship, this culture of unforgiveness, this culture of frankly theocracy that tells me that I can only have these opinions, and then if I have any other opinions, and that I kind of fall into a certain different area that I should be completely snipped off of, burnt off of the tapestry, like the Black family from Harry Potter, that I should just be completely disowned and forgotten permanently. That the social fabric should leave me by the wayside for the beliefs that I have come to, that actually that there's no room for forgiveness, that people can actually think things that are wrong, and that there is room for redemption. It's like, yeah, introspection, growth, accountability, responsibility. It's like, yeah, well, yeah, people are responsible for recognizing and being as good as they possibly can in their individual lives. What are you doing to actually assist people in doing that? Because if you want people to be introspective, if you want them to grow, if you want them to be to hold themselves accountable, if you want them to be responsible, then you should actually present your case and not make them the enemy, and not put them in a position where they think that they must speak out more, as I do, so that other people will know that I am not a coward, that I'm not going to cower to your demands, that I'm not actually going to bend the knee to the regime here, that it doesn't matter how hard you try to beat me into submission, I'm going to continually resist. That's what I'm speaking towards. That's what I am saying to you, that I stand in direct opposition to this ideological fascism, and that's what the hell you are. And to send that message to everybody else who may agree that actually that there is there are people who are not going to condemn them to death for falling on an issue where I truly do believe that reasonable minds can disagree, and that even if you did something that I believe to be morally repugnant, that I will welcome you with open arms when you prove yourself to be capable of doing better, when you've actually redeemed yourself in a reasonable capacity, that I say, welcome, I'm glad that you came around, and I'm glad that we can now coexist, and I'm glad that we can all continue forward without without being at each other's throats anymore. I will welcome every single person who goes from being a leftist being a leftist or whatnot to being a liberal, in the very least, that we can have these rational debates. Being from the fascist perspective of nobody should be allowed to speak if they believe something that I don't like, to saying we can all agree on the right to freedom of speech, and all sorts of these ideas, that we can actually coexist, because this is inherently a disintegrationist attitude. You don't want to be able to coexist with me, and it's just like, it just means they're uninvited to the cookout, and hopefully they don't find out where it is, just in case they pull a conservatism. It's like pulling a conservatism. Oh no, we're going to come up and respect your rights. Oh no, whatever are we to do? It's like, fuck off. Your perception of conservatism is so insanely outside any reasonable realm of what actual conservatism is, or at least of what my definition of conservatism is. That it's like, so if you think that fascism is bad, first of all, I think you should take a long, hard look at yourself, because, buddy, clearly you've got some blind spots here. Clearly you don't understand. But if you think that conservatism equals bad, because conservatism equals the Mexican cartel, then that's not the definition that I'm operating off of. So let's actually agree on a definition, because I'm just talking about rights, responsibility, effectively just constitutional originalism. The ideas within the Declaration of Independence, like, that's it. And if that is like you can't logically, you cannot logically be honest about your perception of that and also lump that in with fascism, because it's not the same bloody thing. Fascism, the idea that we all have inalienable human rights, fascism didn't give a shit about those. The idea that there's a right to free speech, fascism inherently didn't give a shit about that. As you don't. Plenty of ways that this that those principles clearly were strayed from. I don't even think they had a common ancestor, obviously, because fascism started in Italy and then had several iterations throughout Europe, and really hardly made its way over to America, and that its common ancestor would be like ideologically way far back before Aristotle, quite possibly. Like, I don't know, like, it's just intensely obtuse to be operating under this delusional definition. It's like they're uninvited to the cookout, and hopefully they don't find where it is, because they're going to show up and respect our rights. It's like, I respect your rights more than you respect mine. I think that means a lot. I think that's pretty indicative of a couple things. But it's like, again, what is the limiting principle here? Because there's a difference between a cookout within because you were actually talking of something of significantly higher scale, because this isn't just sort of a community situation where it's like, oh yeah, all these people, they live in around the same place and they all have this location in common, or they all have these ideas in common. The communist cookout, we all believe in the or whatever, like, we're gonna invite everybody over and have the cookout, and we're all gonna agree on all of these things, and if anybody who disagrees, then we're not really going to tolerate that, or whatever that is. Like, that is a completely different magnitude, but by the order of magnitudes, we're talking about a subculture that really comes out of an appreciation for art, an appreciation for imaginative sort of reflection on creatures that are non-human but have personification applied to them, that we can express ourselves like that. That is a thing that actually massively transcends physical boundaries. That this is something that happens on the internet, and it turns out that when you have loads of people coming together on the internet, that now there's going to be an open debate where there's loads of people who don't agree with each other, on plenty of basic principles, and that they're going to separate themselves into these lines. What you are saying is that nobody should be able to call themselves a furry and also believe that there are any less or any less than 3 gender identities. It's like, I believe there are individual identities. I don't believe that gender identities is inherently a separate categorization that we can genuinely make. I'm not talking about gender, I'm talking about sex, and I think that sex should actually be understood as something that means something, that has a certain amount of a bearing in defining a certain amount of things about your life, your capabilities, your brain functionality, and that is neither good nor bad. It just is, and that we should actually be aware of it. And if we can't be aware of it, then we're going to be a little bit more fucking little bit happier if we can actually have a healthy what's the word, relationship with reality. Somewhere in the video you were talking about fatherlessness. Despite all the strange and frankly horrible things you said in that word salad, it's like, okay, just somewhere in the video you were talking about fatherlessness. Like, do I really have to like do the job that you refused to do? What is the context that you were too lazy to just click show transcript, hit Control F? Because it's like, I mean, you typed all of this out, you had the time to do that, but you were too lazy to just do this. It's like, oh, look, I found it. Look at this amazing technology. Look at these cool tools that we've got at our disposal to immediately find what we're talking about. Let's see how you took me out of context here. $, and you give that money specifically to single mothers. What happens? What happens then? You kind of end up with the sort of the Model Cities program. You kind of end up with a situation like Detroit. You kind of end up with massive fatherlessness in these communities. And psychologically, we know for a fact that the most important member, the most important person in a child's life is first the parent of the same sex, and second the parent of the opposite sex. Because what does that teach you? The parent of the same sex teaches you. Yeah. So what I'm referring to here is a psychological pathology. It's a sociological studies, and there's many stuff to back this up. This is factual. There's many things that you can actually posit to back this up. Now, obviously, I'm going a priori, so I'm going off of what my perception of these things are, what my understanding of these things are. Not just sort of like constantly having to because obviously, you know, it takes time to go out of your way to sort of find all of these links and whatnot. And doing this on stream is something that I'm not exactly going to be doing. So I'm going to draw upon the ideas that I've got already in my head, the stuff that the information that I've actually picked up from my education, from my own research, from things that I have heard evidence and argumentation for, that I have taken at face value. The entire argument that I'm making is that there is a utilitarian consequence towards enabling fatherlessness, that actually due to the fact that each that men and women need each other, because men and women are inherently different. Because it's like that's premise number one. Males and females are different, and that, you know, therefore they have different needs, and those needs need to be catered to. Therefore, the most important figure in a male child's life, or in a child's, I did the exact same thing that I did in the bloody clip there. Goodness sake, the most important figure in any child's life is, number one, the parent of the same sex, and number two, the parent of the opposite sex, because inherently you need to actually be taught how to mitigate the issues with your sex, and also how to coexist with the opposite sex. So how do you know how to act well as a male? Well, your father teaches you to do that. How do you know how to act well in accordance as a male to coexisting with females? Well, your mother teaches you how to do that. If every single child was mothered by a mother and fathered by a father, and they were both actively present in the home and teaching them, then each of those children could go out and they would say, okay, I'm going to be the way that my dad was. At least in the way that I believe my dad was correct, I suppose. And I'm going to treat every female as though she is my mother. I think the world will be a better place. I think the world will be a massively better place. But when you actually remove the father from the home, then now the the males don't have a positive male role model in their life. And that is something that the female can't provide to the male, in the same way that a single father can't provide a good example to females, only of this is what a good man should be. Is I can be as good a man as I can, as an example to you of this is what you should look for in a man. I can't actually teach you how to be a woman well unless I put a significant amount of attempts into understanding how women work, and that is going to be a lot more difficult given the fact that I'm not living with one 24/7. And it would be a lot easier if she could explain to you how it is to be a female, because she's actually a female, and I can empathize, but I can't know 100% what it is like to be a female, because my brain does not work that way. I can try to put my head, I can try to walk a mile in their shoes, but I can't actually literally be a female. All of those is operative off of the idea that there are two sexes in a sexually dimorphic species such as Homo sapiens. And last time I checked, then that's other than my species, the only species that is involved in this conversation. But clearly that logic trail is going to appear flawed to somebody who doesn't understand those basic premises. And it's okay for you to actually have a grievance with those premises. The issue is when you get emotional about it, because that actually prevents your ability, and not being emotional about it necessarily, but becoming dogmatic about it. You just said a lot of awful things, didn't you? It's just like, no, I said things that you believe to be awful, but you actually have to prove that to me. And if you actually can prove to me that is something that is awful, if you can convince me that is awful, then I will believe you. But it's probably not going to help when you are just preaching at me. It's probably not going to convince me, especially when you can't even provide the fucking context, all right? It's like, it really shouldn't be that difficult, should it? To click twice, Control F, type in a single word, click again, hit play. Shouldn't be that difficult. And then take down the timestamp and type it into the essay that you're writing. Shouldn't be that difficult. Despite all the strange and frankly horrible things you said in that word salad, it's like, all right, buddy, all righty. I certainly understand that you think it to be so, but the proof is on you. I'd only like to focus on one specific thing you did. You said something to the effect that parents that are the same sex as their children are the most important parent for that child because it teaches them how to act in the gender role that they were assigned at birth. You are not assigned gender roles. I don't believe in gender roles. These are not roles. These are specific aspects that are inherent to the design of the particular individual in a species. That males are designed in one way, females are designed in another way. There are cognitive differences between the two. There are physiological, morphological differences between the two, and we shouldn't just pretend that doesn't exist. That actually has a massive bearing on the behavior and the abilities of each, and that there were some inherent strengths and inherent weaknesses to each individual, and we should be able to be aware of that, and understanding that they can still be equal but also be different. And if we want to treat them as though they are the exact same, that is not going to actually show in reality. We can't just, it's like, you have a problem with reality, and that is a reality that people can't just decide what they want to be. I can't just decide to take the bloody pup named Scooby-Doo pill and turn into a spaceship. All right, like I can't just like magically snap my fingers and become something that I'm not. There are certain things that I can't change, and if you don't like it, change it. If you can't change it, change the way you think about it. It's inherently a wise principle. It's effectively cognitive behavioral therapy in a single statement by Mary Engelbreit, I believe is, I don't remember how you say her name. I don't even know if you realize that you're doing this. I just want your clarification, but you're not so subtly implying that it's better for people to be cisgender than to be gender non-conforming. I'm not saying that they are better or worse people. I'm saying that they are going to be happier or sadder people, and that there is going to be a consequential reaction, like not necessarily from a moral perspective necessarily, but from sort of the Aristotelian perspective, that what is good is inherent in the design. A good table is a good table because it's got 4 legs and it actually does its job that is inherent to the design of the table. A good female is inherent to the design of the female. A good male is inherent to the design of the male. That a male was given strength and power so that they could use it to protect those with less strength and power than themselves, so that other people who abuse their rights to use their strength and power as they so please, in violation of the non-aggression principle, that you can actually protect the people who are being mistreated and having their rights abused. That is the moral case that I am making. Not that it is better or worse, but that it is more advantageous or less advantageous in all senses of the word, that you actually have a healthy relationship with reality. Like, I'm not saying that like you're a worse person in a moral sense. I'm saying that in a morphological sense, that you are not actually living up to the intrinsic aspects of your design. If a car has a faulty engine and you can't start it anymore, then therefore it has no reason to exist, that it's not doing its job, and you should actually repair it so it can do its job, or you better get rid of it because it's not actually doing its job. And obviously that is a concept that is has a lot of flaws to it, because you have to have a limiting principle with it eventually, which is part of the reason why I think Aristotle's framework is useful in many ways, but also it fails when it comes to, it's like, okay, so if a woman is infertile, then should we just kill her because she's useless now? You think the entire worth of a woman is because she can give birth? And obviously that is a pretty evil idea. I must say that actually no, men are that they might have joy, that the human species exists for the pursuit of happiness, and therefore, if you prefer to pursue happiness from a utilitarian perspective, you should actually consider what the intrinsic design is and how that has a bearing on what your risk assessment should be for behavior, and which behaviors will bring about the best consequences in the sense of your happiness, and from sort of the objectivist point of view, that what's good for you is what's good for me, that or what's good for me is what's good for you, that if I want something to go well for me, then I should treat you how I want to be treated. So the golden rule is kind of intrinsic to that nature. So I've just sort of tied in a million different moral principles into one sort of idea, but this is sort of the expansion on that. This is something that is widely accepted within psychology, and if you actually would take in all of the information, you would realize that the people who are being ascientific are the people who think that sex has absolutely no bearing whatsoever on the intrinsic behaviors, the intrinsic pathologies, the intrinsic sociological behaviors that each individual in the species behaves out of, that it's actually downstream of that instruction set in your DNA, and that obviously that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have any amount of individualism, but that does mean that you should actually understand obviously with the Chesterton test, because you don't know what that is because you don't know what conservatism is. The Chesterton test of like, well, I don't actually know why this wall is here, so rather than getting mad that it's here and tearing it down because I think it's in the way of my purposes, I should understand what the purpose of the wall is, so that I must not tear that wall down until I know what the purpose is. You think that there is a wall with gender that limits you, and you think that the grass is greener on the other side, and so you want to tear that down so people who think the grass is greener on yours can come over to yours, and that you can go over to theirs, and we can all be free, without actually realizing that those separations is because we are different and we have different needs, and that actually both men and women become more miserable when we when we pretend that those differences don't exist, that or that the differences do exist, but we should put the needs of one over the other, that women have an emotional need, and therefore men should always cater to the emotional need, even to the point of lying to them and I don't know, whatever that may be, where actually telling the truth can be the best thing that you can do, where you actually do. I think everybody intrinsically does have the need to be told as much truth as possible so that they can actually integrate that truth into the way that they live. It's just difficult to know what the truth is because the truth is not always obvious. Hence the reason why we're having a discussion here. And so that's why we have to actually have the discussions in the first place, so that everybody has enough information to discern what the truth is, and to build a risk assessment machine so that they can actually make decisions for themselves within a moral code that is consistent and that is objectively moral. If we can actually see that to be the case. It's better for people to be cisgender than to be gender non-conforming. If you believe that's better for people to be cisgender, why? If not, why not? Very strange. Well, obviously it will be strange from your perspective, but I think I've posited pretty clearly that my position is that you should actually understand that there is a bearing on this, and that if I want to lie to you to make you feel better about yourself, then I'm not helping you. I'm doing you a disservice, and I'm actually making you more miserable by not supplying that truth to you, by not being honest with you. That I'm not going to lie to you because I think that is bad for you, and it is bad for me. It is a bad thing for me to do. It is a sin of commission that I would bear false witness to you. So I'm going to tell the truth to you, to my children, to the youth, to everybody, and that I speak that particular truth, and that so that they can actually understand, oh right, this is the reason why things are the way that they are. And just because it's difficult does not mean that I can't understand, or just because I don't like a certain amount of the way that things are doesn't mean that I should actually I don't know, refuse to accept reality, that actually accepting reality, that there is no joy without discipline, and that I must have discipline that is born out of a sort of a what do you call it, a adherence to better moral principles, a greater adherence to truth. I don't think more truth is ever really a bad thing. I think a lot of the time, like, I think we're going to assess truth, and, you know, we could use a lot more of it. And so sometimes we're going to blunder, as both as individuals and as a collective, that we're going to be reviewing the information in front of us, and we're going to make some mistakes. But that's part of the reason, the great reason why we should actually be sharing this this information, that no one perspective should be left out. No one should shut themselves out to differing opinions and stuff that doesn't fit within their box, that everybody should be willing to change their box and to fight that bias, so that we can actually all accept truths and integrate those truths into our more moral persuasion, so that we can all be behaving in a more moral way. And like that's good. Waffling on so hard on whether or not child labor is good is such a bad look, like yikes, dude. This is such an incredibly dishonest read on what the hell I was actually saying about that. I was saying I'm not familiar with any of these laws, so I don't necessarily know if these laws are good or bad. That is effectively the entire response that I had to that. And then I was discussing, well, the reason why we actually don't think that child labor is a good thing is because well, I don't know if I may have been discussing, like, well, children actually can't consent, and so therefore they don't have the risk assessment ability to actually understand that labor. It's like, have you taken a single philosophy class, dude? What I'm doing here is I am trying to understand, to find an explanation through empirical evidence and through rationality, or through reason, as to why we believe what we believe, and not just assuming any one thing to be true. That is the entire purpose, is that we can't assume, we can't assume anything to be true, sort of permanently, and that we're actually going to be skipping a lot of steps. And it's like, effectively my entire response to that was like, I don't think I'm going to trust you on what red states are doing, and I'm not going to trust the mainstream media on what red states are doing, because you don't even know what a conservative is, and you clearly just hate conservatives for your personal subjective perception of that. And CNN is incredibly biased, mainstream media is incredibly biased, and this individual is aware of it, while at the same time just like, oh, there's no bias. It's just like, no, you literally just said that we control art and we control media and we control all of these things, and we gatekeep conservatism. It's like, okay, and you think the dictatorship of the Y should also be the ones in charge of which opinions are acceptable and which opinions are unacceptable, and which studies should be buried and which studies should not. It's like, buddy, like the entire purpose of draconian discourse is discourse, and discourse inherently requires two people to sit down, have a good faith conversation with each other, in a ideological battle of looking for empirical evidence and solid reasoning for an explanation as to why we believe what we believe, so that we can discern more truth a priori, or with evidence and semantics involved. It's inherently a semantical thing, and so the entire perspective is, well, all right, if I agree with this premise, then I'm not going to challenge that premise. If I don't agree with that premise, then I'm not going to assume to go along with that premise, where it's like, actually, I disagree with that premise, but let's assume that for the time being that this premise is true. Then, therefore, is this argument a sound argument in that it doesn't contradict itself or anything? Like, you really need to take a philosophy class, seriously. Like, the reason I was waffling so hard whether or not child labor is good, which first of all is a misread. I didn't say that child labor was good. I said that I didn't know the rationale behind what the laws were. I don't know what the laws actually stipulate, and I don't know if those laws are vestigial, whether there's actually not a reason to have those laws in place, or I don't know. Like, it's all I've been told is that these laws are child labor laws, and that apparently red states have been deciding to strike them down. And I also believe that the people who are presenting that information have a significant interest in lying about it. So that's the entire case that I was making in that situation. That's the entire consideration that I was having there, was merely a philosophical one. And if you've listened to enough of any of the streams that I've been doing within this context, that you probably actually understand, God forbid, that I'm just entertaining moral questions. I'm trying to understand why we believe what we believe. That's what philosophy is. That's what discourse is. We're having a conversation about these things, and if you're not willing to entertain, because all just like, oh, yikes, dude. It's like, this is just bloody obtuse. If you can't explain why you believe that child labor is wrong, then why do you believe child labor is wrong? Because I could give you a plenty of reasons and empirical evidence and rationale for why child labor is wrong, and I can actually start from a simple present simple predicament of you own your own labor, number one, and then the premise two being that you can voluntarily enter into an agreement, taking in a trade-off and a risk assessment with another party, that you can actually trade your labor for something of equal value, and then number three, that a child is not capable of making that risk assessment on their own. Therefore, nobody has any good right to decide for them, because they can't decide for themselves. Therefore, child labor is not morally permissible. Would you actually be able to explain that? I'm certain you could. But all you wanted to do was say, you don't think that child labor is... No, that's not what I bloody said. Like, this is so poor faith. All of these are just poor faith arguments, and taking things out of context, and straw manning, and just bloody, like, assume that I have good intentions, maybe. Maybe assume that I don't think that children should, I don't know, that they yearn for the minds or something. Like, is it really that hard? Do you really think that I think that is the case? Or do you think that I may just disagree on the facts that maybe they're calling them child labor laws? I don't know what the hell the laws are. I don't know the context. And so people should actually show the context if they're going to do that, rather than just saying, well, they're trying to strike down child labor laws. I guess that's a pretty bad thing. Oh, gotcha. They're trying to strike down child labor laws. It's like, okay, I don't know what the laws are. Let's actually assess the situation rather than just assume it to be true with no empirical evidence. Because obviously, if I agree with you that premise number one is that red states are trying to tear down, take down reverse child labor laws, then or I suppose number one would be that child labor equals bad. Number two being that these states are trying to get rid of the laws that prevent that make child labor illegal. Number three, therefore, these states' actions are not morally permissible. Then obviously I would agree with that. I don't agree with premise number two in that these states are doing that. I actually don't believe you, believe it or not, because you can't even tell me what you think a conservative is. So I think you have a massive bias against them. So I don't think that you're going to be willing to tell the truth about them. I think you have a vested interest in lying. And that's why I don't believe in premise number two. I absolutely agree with premise number one, and I would agree with premise number three if number two was true. But I don't believe number two is true. So it's a sound argument. It's not a valid argument. That is what I'm saying. Like, take a single damn philosophy class, please. If you think all I want to do is throw up walls so I can't hear conservative arguments, clearly you do. Clearly you do. Why do you think I suffered in agony? Was it really suffering in agony? Through as much of your content as I could endure. That's an interesting thing. It's like, well, okay, suffering in agony. It's like, clearly you want to have a debate, and this is something that I said to this bloke as well, is that it's like, okay, your willingness to actually respond in some sort of way proves that there is some sort of an exchange of information here, that you are willing to exchange information. It's just you're not willing to listen. That's the idea. You don't actually want to take any of my arguments at face value. That's the entire difference here. It's like you did hear conservative arguments. You just don't want to hear them in certain situations. You don't want to actually coexist with conservatives. And you also don't want them to be able to actually have free speech. You'd rather us die, as you've clearly stipulated in your previous comments here. Why do you think I took the time to write this? It's like, well, for the same reason I took the time to respond to it. It's because we're interested in at least being able to rationalize our own positions, even if we don't think that somebody else is listening. Like, obviously, we're both coming from the same situation, that we are bothered by, in sort of a subjective sense, the bloody. Why do I always forget this? Why do I always brain fart about this one? We are bothered by the fact that we believe what we believe is true, but somebody else does not agree. So therefore, it's possible that it's not true, because if it were true, maybe how could they not agree? So therefore, we have to actually assess which facts that we have in common and which argumentation and which values that we have that is bringing us to the opposite conclusions, and that we should actually assess the reasoning behind it. And so I need to be able to assess, like, no, the reason you are wrong is because of this, and because you are ignorant of these things, and that you haven't considered it from this perspective, which I think is obviously there is a civil way to say that, and there's an uncivil way to say that. And obviously the uncivil way to say that is that you're stupid for not seeing things the way that I see it, which is the dogmatic principle that both of these individuals have operated on, based off of just in so many words with one of them. It's like, yes, both of us aren't able to relax intellectually, knowing that there are people who disagree with us, and that have different perspectives, and that we may not understand, and so we actually want to process these understandings. And this is exactly why I spent so long doing this. And I before I even started streaming any sort of discourse out, I used to do it on my own, to myself all of the time, where I take the arguments that are being presented at me and I explore them in real time, just sort of EFAPing them in real time, as a way of exploring an intellectual, logical debate involving the subject matter, the subject at hand, and helping myself to understand why I believe as I do, so that I I may know that I am incorrect in believing it. And every single time it is challenged, I take it up again to sort of figure it out and everything. It's like, we're both doing the same thing. One of us just thinks the other should die for it, and the other would be willing to die to protect the rights of the other. And the one who does not want people who I disagree with to die is me, and the one who wants people who disagree with them to die is you. So sorry about that, Clara. I hope you can let go of your hate. Okay, let go of all of that hate. I was going to look at effectively Blitzkrieg Wolf here had said that this was just like you're gaslighting us effectively is what he's saying, and that you're not having a good faith conversation. But the response here, because it was saying, how about you actually talk to some real conservative folk and have an actual conversation instead of spouting a bunch of biased jargon in hopes that something sticks to the wall. And the response was, I live in Mississippi, you absolute fucking nitwit. Trust me, I talk to quote unquote real conservatives every day. Nice try. It's like, really? Because if you talk to quote unquote real conservatives every day, you would realize that they're not fascists, and that you actually have a lot more ideological commonalities with fascists than they do. Because, I don't know, if your definition of conservatism is just like people who you think are bigoted, then obviously you are going to look at other people who say that they identify with conservatism in a completely different light. But we have to be operating off the same bloody definition of conservatism, and so you actually have to define the term here. Like, I mean, this would be a much better view if you actually broke it down into the philosophical bloody tool, whatever the standard form of argumentation, where if you're just like, premise number one is that conservatives are all of the conservatives equal the bloody Mexican cartel, and then you do your argument from there, so that you can like, I kind of wish that this is the way that people actually did it, is just being like, premise number one, we have to agree that this is the case. And it's like, okay, I disagree with premise number one, and here's why. I disagree with number two, and here's why. I don't disagree with number three if numbers 1 and 2 are true. And so therefore premise numbers 4 and 5 I would also agree with. I think those arguments are sound, but the other premises are not true. So you have a sound argument, but not a valid argument from my point of view. Like, if we could actually have that conversation, then that would be a pretty fantastic thing. Rather than just being like, okay, because this conversation would take a whole hell of a lot less time if you just put it in a standard format, rather than just sort of like going all over the place for it. It's a lot more consolidated when you do this. So it's like, I talk with real conservatives every day. It's like, okay, just because they identify under the same label that I would tend to identify with doesn't mean that they believe in the same things. There are common good conservatives like Tucker Carlson, who I disagree with immensely on such aspects as capitalism, and sort of anti-corporatism, and common good being sort of more of an equal outcome value that puts him a little bit further to the left than I would be, so long as we're agreeing on the same definition of political left and right. If we could actually just like talk about this and understand, it's like, okay, some people actually have a different definition of conservatism, obviously, and you can disagree with what you perceive to be conservatism, and that's not actually my definition that I'm operating off of. So words kind of mean things, and we kind of have to agree on them in order to be able to communicate with each other properly. Shouldn't be that difficult. You should at least define your terms first. It's like, okay, if your idea of a conservative is somebody who believes in equal rights and responsibility, then then I would disagree with those values for a multitude of reasons. But what I'm talking about is people who I perceive to be racist, sexist, bigot, homophobes. And I'd be like, okay, yeah, because I'm clearly in the good category here and not in the bad category here. Give me an alternative question. It's a much better way to find common ground and understand where we disagree with each other than to just kind of like, just, I don't know, this stuff. It's like, nice try. It's like, I don't even know if the people who you are talking with like live up to your definition of conservatism, live up to my definition of conservatism, or live up to their definition of conservatism. What are they trying to conserve? Because, this bloke thinks conservatism is just conserving things for the sake of old things should stay around. It's like, well, no, I want that wall to not be torn down if there is a good reason for that wall to be torn down. But if there's no good reason for it to be torn down, I'm right there with you that we should tear it down, but we should actually have a conversation about it first, have an investigation as to what it's for before we tear it down. It's a principle of wisdom. That's what I'm talking about. And I don't think people would disagree that, well, if there's a reason for the wall to be there, we shouldn't tear it down. I think most of the time people say, I can't see there being a reason for the wall to be torn down. It's like, okay, well, that's a blind spot, and maybe I can enlighten you on that. You don't want to listen to that because you think everybody you disagree with is a conservative, which is not true. There are people probably on the political left that you disagree with. There are people probably on the authoritarian side that you might disagree with. There are people on the libertarian side you might disagree. You will disagree with everybody who doesn't believe exactly what you believe. And there's a lot of persuasions around, so we just have to be able to define what the persuasions are so we can actually know what we're fucking talking about. Can we just acknowledge how funny it is that this great value spiral? Listen, that's just bigoted, all right? That's just bigoted. You're judging me for the color of my scales and not by the content of my character. I'm a different dragon, all right? Different dragon entirely. So bigoted, so bigoted. Great value spiral yapped for 2 hours, and also, okay, how dare you, by the way, because I yapped for far longer than 2 hours. Last night I yapped for 6, and I've already yapped for half of that so far. When it comes to this particular topic, I yapped from these episodes here to this episode, so that would be 2 hours here, an additional, give or take 3, an additional 4, and an additional 30 there. So we can actually put that all together and make that about like I actually forgot about all the bloody I forgot to actually add them up in my head. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 ish. Yeah, let's just call it about 9 hours and 10 minutes, give or take. So, how dare you say that I only waffled for 2 hours? I waffled for 9. All right. You didn't even check the rest of the video. I did say at the beginning that this was a continuation. So, and it says in the title that this is a part 2. So, it was far more than 2 hours that we've got here. So, come on. Those people seem weird. I think he left like 40 minutes ago. Who left like 40 minutes ago? I'm not sure who you were referring to. I mean, I don't know if they're necessarily all that weird. Like, I don't think this is sort of an abnormal thing. Your rooster friend, I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. Weird is all a matter of perspective. You would be wise to recognize that. It's like, yeah, for 2 hours about how the nasty leftists are being mean to poor little conservatives. It's like, no, I don't think I'm a victim of anything but anything but a culture that tells me to just kiss the boot. All right, like, I'm not like a poor little conservative. I don't know, like, poor and little in what sense? Like, the only thing that I'm a victim of is, I don't know, being maligned, being judged for the actions of others and not by things that I've actually guilty of. It's like that's the only thing that the way that I've been victimized here, and I'm not about to say that other people using their rights incorrectly in a moral sense, that other people using their rights to say things that I believe are morally repugnant means that they don't deserve those rights anymore. You absolutely deserve the right to make a video as he did, or to make as many nasty comments as you did. Or, well, I don't know. Not all of the comments were nasty, but the maligning was nasty, and the deception was nasty, and the hypocrisy was nasty. But you have a right to be nasty. You have a right to be an asshole. It's America, so. No, they're not fascists. They're not wolves in sheep's clothing. And the one person comes crawling out to support him. His name's Blitzkrieg Wolf. It's really funny, like, that we've got somebody who shows up here who bloody has effectively iconography that is in support of the Holodomor, the Ukrainian genocide by starvation of the USSR, and it's like. This is somebody who is a progressive or a leftist, but it's like, but these, we're definitely not the authoritarians here. We're definitely not people who who get all starry-eyed about authoritarian regimes, because we think that's a great thing, that it's okay to actually allow everybody to starve because the regime said it was okay. It's like, I don't know. It's kind of funny if we want to talk about the one person who came out crawling to support people. It's like, this is literal like genocide iconography, and then someone named themselves a funny German word that actually predates like, I don't know, it's just so reductive, because it's like, just because you named yourself something about Blitzkrieg does not mean, it's like, obviously you associate the word Blitzkrieg with the particular German military that nobody likes, and we can agree that nobody likes it, all right? I don't know if he necessarily can. I don't know, because I'm not in his head or his heart, but like, I don't know, generally someone who believes in sort of a right-wing traditional conservatism, like the real bad guy. Conservatives have been battling the issue of predators and provocative material getting out of control for decades. Like, I don't know, garner support for sexualization through cartoons and content that could be mistaken by kids as content. Like, a lot of this this ideology that is here is like, I don't know, that doesn't sound too Nazi to me. Like, if you're actually familiar with what the Nazi ideology was, then maybe you'd realize that, like, fascism is a lot more akin to what you are, your principles that you're arguing for, and your logic that you are utilizing, than the logic of I don't know. It's just kind of interesting. It's like, I don't know if there's any sort of a mistaken sort of agreement, either mistaken or genuine agreement of this individual, because I don't know. It's like, I could like ping the Blitzkrieg Wolf and be like, hey, you named yourself Blitzkrieg, why'd you do that? And then it's just like, it's just a cool word, and I'm a history buff. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, cool. But it's just like, no, I actually think that Blitzkrieg was genius, and I'm very admiring of the way that the Nazis used Blitzkrieg in the Second World War, and it's like, oh, okay. Do you also agree with the rest of their ideology? Like, it's like, because I tolerate somebody naming themselves something, because I assume that just because they named themselves a German word that is it's like, I don't know, what is another like good example? It's not like he's actually wearing like bloody like his character actually has like a bloody armband, like as far as I can tell from sort of this this context, that like all I'm really getting from this is that this is somebody who finds, tactical gear and guns to be interesting, and that just tends to be a generally male persuasion, generally a pretty common male interest. So it's just like, I don't know, there's plenty of very pro-gun furries, there's plenty of pro-gun conservatives, but within the definition of conservatism that I am operating under, then you can't be conservative and also be fascist. You can't be because I'm actually defining the ideology as one thing and you're defining it as something that is exactly the opposite. What I'm saying is that you can actually tolerate my disagreement with you without believing that I am outside the Overton window, and also attempting to shove the Overton window so hard and to compress the Overton window to the point that nobody who doesn't agree with you on something as complicated that reasonable minds can disagree on, surely reasonable minds can disagree on there being infinite gender identities. Like, this is clearly a conversation that we should be able to have, and I'm just saying that we should be able to have it and assume that other people are being genuine about the things that they are arguing for. And I don't know, I would certainly say that there is more cause for concern for somebody who is using literal, like, genocide iconography versus somebody who is using a German word that was just popularized by Nazism, in particular, in the Second World War. It's like, does that mean that I like Nazism? No, it just means that I'm not willing to it means Hanlon's razor. It means I'm not willing to attribute to malice something that I can't contribute to incompetence. It's just like, maybe he just thought the word was cool and he chose it when he was 11 or something. Because I don't know, German words are a little bit metal, they're a little bit guttural, and they sound kind of punchy, like Panzerfaust, like Panzerschreck, like these words. I'm probably butchering them to a certain degree because they're sort of the glottal pronunciation is a little bit more nuanced, probably. But I'm just a little bit familiar with the language to a certain degree, because it's a language that people speak. Does speaking German make you fascist? Germany bans fascist iconography entirely. You can't show the iconography. Like, you can't talking about Nazis can potentially get you prosecuted in Germany, but they still speak German. Like, if you mention Blitzkrieg at all, if you name yourself Blitzkrieg Wolf, I don't know, would that be bad if you called it like guerrilla warfare wolf? Like, if it was guerrilla wolf, as in the French term, like, would that associate you with the origins of that word as well, or the popularization of that word as well? Where, I don't know, most Americans would associate that with the Revolutionary War, but it did also, it came from, the French, where it's, I don't know how you would pronounce that in French, but I don't know, maybe they would have taken that from just the video game Far Cry 6, where they talk about the guerrillas. It's like, you have no idea why they named themselves that, and if we actually have evidence that they named themselves that because they are sympathetic to the context, the connotation of the word in particular, then obviously I would be in agreement that is a cause for concern. But if we actually don't have any evidence to prove that sort of intent, then this is just, it's like, this is just a gotcha. This is just like, ooh, but this person did a thing. It's like, okay. Can we actually be, like, honest about this? Can we can we make some good faith arguments here? Because just because somebody used a certain word in their username doesn't mean that they are thinking of it in the exact same way. Like what is this strange, like I don't know, the perception or behavior, pathology that these people seem to have, where they just think that you can read their mind, and they can read your mind. It's like, no, you actually need to present proofs of what you're arguing for. Otherwise, I'm not going to just like sort of follow along blindly with what you're saying. You actually have to kind of provide me with some reasoning here. Like, the conclusion is take a philosophy class. That's the entire conclusion. Only 3 hours and 21 minutes on that one. Definitely went on a couple of tangents, but you know me, so that should be all for today. And hopefully I'll actually do some game streaming. Perhaps tomorrow I'll use the afternoon for that, or I'll use it to continue working in Blender, whichever I see fit, whichever pleases my fancy, I suppose. Yeah, thanks for being somewhat bearable, Ubear. Yeah, I guess that's it. There's not really like there's anything else to say at this point, other than behave. Just behave and take a philosophy class. Good night. What did you do on Blender? All sorts of things. Basically the entire pipeline. I haven't had enough experience in rendering and animation quite yet, but I know the theory. So anyhow, toodaloo.